and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 10th of November. Today, the crows circle around Suella, but the Tory grassroots are sticking by her. The PM faces pressure to sack his Home Secretary for going off script over protest politics. But could this actually boost brand Braverman? We'll be live in Westminster.
The Home Secretary's future hangs in the balance after she defied a direct order from Number 10. But given his precarious political position, can the Prime Minister really afford to lose her?
British steel, Chinese owned. As thousands of jobs come under threat from plans to make Scunthorpe steel plant go green, we're asking what this means for regional employment and great British steel.
It's all coming out now as the COVID inquiry continues to reveal the ominous shambles that went on in Whitehall. Now, WhatsApp messages show Matt Hancock was worried that checks on jabs were inadequate a month after rollout began.
And Alex has your weather.
There's some hefty showers around right now, but for many, much of today will be dry and bright. Join me later for all the details of today's and the weekend's weather.
And, of course, Paul's got the sport this morning.
I do. Ready for these ones? Liverpool score 2 but lose in Toulouse. OK. And Brighton clean up at Ajax. Ajax? It's early. OK, that's the best I've got for you.
Worth a try.
I've got to give it a go.
Yeah.
Slow hand clap for me, fair enough.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News. I was watching you yesterday morning, anticipating the John Lewis ad. And I actually completely agree with you. You looked utterly stunned.
I just didn't get it. I mean, look, fine, but I've written a piece online, actually, if you want to check it out, because it's not even about the ad, it's about the fact people are excited about an advert coming out.
Oh, I was excited, though.
I just sort of think, is that what Christmas has come to? People excited about an advert?
No, it's not what Christmas has come to, but it's just sort of... It's almost a tradition now, isn't it? Anyway, we're talking about it again, aren't we? Yeah. But I thought it was very funny watching your face.
Did you like the ads, though?
No, I thought it was dreadful. Don't like the M&S one either.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Is that the Bublé one? No, that's the Asda one.
Yeah. No, the M&S one is where you've got basically some very woke mothers deciding not to do Christmas and they burn paper hats and things like that.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's like a sort of anti-Christmas ad. Really weird.
Oh.
Anyway,
pretty odd, isn't it?
It's odd that we're talking about Christmas already, but here we go.
My sister-in-law's put her tree up.
Oh, that is early.
Mind you, but you like your tree up early.
Yeah, but not quite this early.
No. There's got to be a reason behind it, but I haven't got to the bottom of that. But she's staying with me at the moment. So I shall dig out all the details.
Yes, yes. It is quite early, though, isn't it?
I think it's a little bit early, but anyway, I'm saying nothing. Yeah. Now, let's have a look at our main news for you this morning. The Home Secretary's future is hanging in the balance.
Writing in the Times, Suella Braverman not only accused the police of giving pro-Palestinian demonstrators special treatment, she apparently did so without the Prime Minister's approval.
Well, for the Home Secretary to do that is astonishing, but Rishi Sunak says he has every confidence in her. Well, traditionally, that's not a that's not a good sign, actually.
Well,
no, but calls for her to be sacked haven't gone away, of course. Here's Sir Keir Starmer.
He must know that this isn't the way in which a Home Secretary should behave. He must know in himself that the role of responsible government is to reduce tension and to support the police in difficult decisions that they have to make. He's got a Home Secretary who's out of control, and he is too weak to do anything about it. That's the worst of all combinations, and that's why across the country, repeatedly people are coming up to me and saying, we just need change now. We've just had enough of this.
Well, let's remind ourselves of Suella Braverman's recent remarks, the remarks that have led some Conservative MPs to say she's unhinged.
Well, she's been criticised for using the phrases of an invasion of migrants and, more recently, a hurricane of migrants coming to the UK.
And a week ago, another intervention, the pro-Palestinian protests, were, she called, hate marches.
And now she's accused the force, a police force, of applying double standards to its policing of protests.
She claimed aggressive right-wing protesters were rightly met with a stern response, whilst pro-Palestinian mobs were largely ignored.
Well, it is very inflammatory language. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who's in our Westminster studio for us this morning. Look, inflammatory language, but does she have a point, or is this a sacking offence?
Well, it is certainly inflammatory language. Her allies would say that the voters are behind her. And if you look at some polls of newspapers that traditionally have Conservative voters among their customers, it is clear that there are a lot of Conservatives in the country who like Suella Braverman a lot. She certainly has her allies within the Conservative Party as well. It's thought there are about 50 MPs who really, really want Suella Braverman to stay and will probably make quite a lot of noise about it if she ends up being sacked. The question for Rishi Sunak is, did she break the ministerial code? Now, there is actually quite a bit of wiggle room there. The ministerial code says that any content in a newspaper related to policy must be signed off by 10 Downing Street before it's published. I'm paraphrasing a bit there, but that's the gist of it. Now, Suella Braverman and her team will argue that the piece that she wrote in the Times wasn't actually about policy. She was criticising the Metropolitan Police in harsher language than Downing Street would have liked, but it wasn't a policy issue. Therefore, she didn't break the ministerial code. Will Rishi Sunak buy that? And even if he does buy that, will he want to keep her? Has she just seriously undermined his authority here? There is an element of that, and we know that Rishi Sunak is feeling weak at the moment. He's feeling bruised after those 2 by-election defeats. Does he really want someone in his inner team who is prepared to go against his word like that? That said, there are lots of reasons not to get rid of her as well. The Rwanda plan, which of course Suella Braverman championed, that plan to send migrants over to Rwanda when their claims are being processed, is going through the Supreme Court next week. Would he not want to have the Home Secretary there, the champion of that plan, when that result is reached, to see that policy through to the end? So there are lots of issues that the Prime Minister is now having to try and balance on both sides. And of course, he doesn't have long to do that. He has people breathing down his neck. He has Keir Starmer breathing down his neck. He has his own MPs breathing down his neck. And if he doesn't make a decision quickly, one way or the other, then he stands open to accusations of looking weak.
I mean, the very protests that have caused all this trouble, really, are happening tomorrow, aren't they? There's no way he can sack her before tomorrow. So maybe he just wants to wait and see what happens.
Perhaps he's hoping that he can wait out the weekend. There are certainly quite a lot of MPs who I've spoken to who are hoping that he does just that, sort of lets the dust settle over the weekend. Also, when the protests take place, people are quite worried about what the sort of tensions will be like, how the Metropolitan Police will respond to Palestinians, to pro-Palestinian marchers who perhaps cross a line. And maybe it'll be clearer by Monday whether Suella Braverman essentially had a point in her article. Perhaps it shouldn't come down to that. It should be a simple question of did she break the ministerial code? But in the minds of voters, it will probably come down to did she have a point? So it could well be that the Prime Minister waits until Monday to make a proper decision. But of course, if he keeps saying over the weekend when asked that he has full confidence in the Home Secretary and then ends up sacking her on Monday, he might end up looking a bit silly.
OK, Olivia, for now, thanks very much indeed.
But as you said, it wouldn't be the first time that when Prime Ministers always say they've got full confidence in one of their ministers.
Death, isn't it?
It really is, historically. And they can turn around later and just sack them.
Yeah, let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com, because it's not just... the problem with this is it's not just about what she said in terms of how things need to be dealt with. It's the underlying issue of should any government be able to control how police police. There's meant to be an independence.
Isn't it? It's not just what she said. It's the fact that, I mean, will it be proven, or could it ever be proven, that the sheer fact that she said what she said will inflame people?
Yes.
In other words, her speaking out in the way she has, could that make things worse? And how would you prove it either way?
I don't know. It's actually a lot more nuanced than I think it appears on the surface if you really sort of dig into it. Anyway, your views would be very welcome on that this morning. Now, thousands of jobs could be lost at British Steel's Scunthorpe plant. Ministers are coming under pressure to protect employment and guarantee steel can continue to be made in the UK.
The Chinese-owned company confirmed that it planned to replace blast furnaces with 2 electric arc versions, which can run on zero-carbon electricity. It's still waiting for appropriate support from the UK government. Our reporter, Anna Riley, has the story.
British Steel has been the heartbeat of Scunthorpe for 160 years, creating employment for the local community. But times have changed. Now its blast furnaces are set to go electric to make steel production here greener by recycling scrap steel. And that could cost 2,000 people their jobs, as well as leaving the UK without the ability to produce its own virgin steel, with ministers pushing for reassurances if the government is to finance the scheme.
If we're going to give hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to British Steel, we have to ensure that we protect steel jobs and that we retain a blast furnace steel-making capability in Scunthorpe. We can't do anything without steel as a nation. Nobody can.
If thousands of jobs are lost at the plant in Scunthorpe, this will have a huge knock-on effect to the local economy, which relies on trade from steel workers. Businesses like Beck Bakery, who sell the majority of food to staff from the plant.
Most of our trade is from the workers, either the British Steel or the contractors, that work on British Steel. I would say 90% of it is.
People here have faced years of uncertainty around the steelworks. They're used to cuts. But this feels different. The blast furnaces are the steelworks.
We make the best steel in the world. We always have them. Tyre cord, rail and everything. It's a steel industry. I don't know how you can go green with a steel industry.
Scunthorpe, it'll be like a museum. It'll be no good at all.
It's been British Steel and it's been here donkey's years, you know, and we're down to the last one. We're down to the last steelworks here, and that'll be the end of it then.
It's inevitable. The steelworks has got to move forward and it's progress, and that unfortunately, sadly for jobs, that's what's happening.
British Steel, along with the council, have also announced plans for an advanced manufacturing park on part of the steelworks site, which could create thousands of green jobs, such as in hydrogen.
It seems a little bit callous to think that you'll try and redesign new jobs and all at the same time as other people are going to have to change theirs. But we've got to have a solid future for kids in this area to want to stay in this area. We want better paid jobs and high engineering jobs, you know, that sort of stuff. And that's what we want for the future for local people.
British Steel's proposals will be reviewed by an external specialist on behalf of trade unions. If plans go ahead, the blast furnaces will remain operational until electric arc furnace installation from late 2025. Anna Riley, GB News, Scunthorpe.
Well, let's talk to the Mayor of Tees Valley, Ben Hootchen, who joins us now, because it's obviously there's a lot of concern around Scunthorpe and the impact there, Ben. But in your area, I mean, you were elected on a pledge to get steelworks back into your area, where there does seem to have been some success.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the plans from British Steel are that they will be building one of those electric arc furnaces in Teesside, next to the beam mill and the special profiles mill that they have in Teesside. So Teesside employ about 1,000 people in the steel industry, working on producing, in effect, beams that go into structures for buildings, and also a special profiles mill, which is a very specialist steelmaking beam mill. And so the idea being that you build the new electric arc furnace and that steel will then automatically feed those furnaces, protecting those jobs and creating about 250 to 300 new steel jobs in Teesside, many of which we lost in 2015 with the closure of the SSI steelworks.
So do you think it's possible for people in Scunthorpe to actually bring jobs back to Scunthorpe the way you have been able to do at Teesside?
Well, the interesting thing about the conversation so far is I think we need to kind of establish some facts, right? So one, the idea that you need blast furnace steel in the UK and all of a sudden we're not going to be reliant on ourselves if we don't have it is incorrect. I mean, new electric arc furnace technology can produce huge amounts of steel for the UK and actually makes us more resilient as the UK. So, for example, British Steel at the moment import from across the world about 6 million tonnes a year of coal, of iron, of coke, that then goes into their plant to make the steel that they produce. That makes us wholly reliant on third countries, many of which are not the UK's allies. Whereas with electric arc furnace technology, the only import that you need for electric arc furnace technology is about 300,000 tonnes of something called hot briquetted iron. So it actually makes us much more resilient as a country. It makes us less reliant on third countries. The second point I would make is obviously the biggest concern that people have are job losses on Scunthorpe. In Teesside, it's a different story. We're creating new jobs. But in Scunthorpe, when you build an electric arc furnace, they are more efficient than blast furnaces. So, you know, there is a misnomer here that they're doing this because it's about green and net zero jobs and all that kind of stuff. Actually, the primary purpose for this is it actually makes British Steel more commercial. It means that they'll stop losing money as a business and they'll be more sustainable. So while there will be some job losses, and I do not recognise the numbers that have been bandied around, what it will actually mean is it'll protect about 3,000 to 3,500 jobs in Scunthorpe for decades and decades to come, which actually is a very good thing because the alternative to building electric arc furnaces and not keeping the blast furnaces because they are so commercially unviable. The alternative is British Steel closes completely, and instead of losing what I think will end up being a few hundred jobs, will end up meaning that 4,500 people are completely out of work, which I think as a business is unsustainable, which is why they're moving towards this new technology.
OK. Ben Hootchen, Mayor of Tees Valley, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Amazing seeing those pictures of steel.
I love it.
Yeah. Me too. You just can't quite grab. I mean, most of us never see that sort of thing as well. Seeing those factory pictures, absolutely amazing.
Now, it is 6:16. If you've just joined us, let's take you through the top stories this morning. And she's lost it and is out of control. Those are the claims being made against the Home Secretary after she labelled pro-Palestine protests hate marches and accused the police of double standards. The Prime Minister is now facing increasing pressure to sack her.
British Steel, Chinese owned, as thousands of jobs come under threat from plans to make British Steel's Scunthorpe plant go green. We're asking what this means for regional employment and great British Steel.
And Israel is to begin daily 4-hour pauses in northern Gaza as heavy fighting rages on. But the UN says the amount of aid getting through is just a fraction of what's needed to deal with the intolerable human situation there at the moment. Now, as a COVID inquiry continues, more and more is revealed about the chaotic scenes in government during the COVID era.
Yes, the former Home Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, told the inquiry that says that coronavirus laws were highly confusing and complex, both for the police and the public, and that the £10,000 fines were disproportionate.
Well, Dame Patel also made it clear to the inquiry that Matt Hancock's Department for Health and Social Care was responsible for COVID laws, saying the Home Office had very little say in it all.
Well, we're joined now by the former Metropolitan Police Detective, Peter Blexley. It's lovely to see you. Hello.
Thank you.
It made life very difficult for the police, actually, didn't it, by the sound of it?
Oh, it certainly did. And I had a degree of sympathy for the police because they were having to operate with rushed legislation. And, of course, rushed legislation is so often the wrong legislation. To think of an example, take the Dangerous Dogs Act of some years ago that was hurriedly brought in and turned out to be a bit of a nightmare for the police to work with. And this was the same with the COVID legislation. And so my sympathy only stretched so far because, of course, what made it additionally challenging for the police was the growing divide between the public and the police that had been created by the dismantling of neighbourhood policing, that Bobby on the beat, the copper that everybody knew. If we'd had that in place, it would have been easier for that connect between the public and the police.
But is there a sense, though, that the police were... It's how you interpret these things, isn't it, often in these situations? And when you had these sort of high-profile cases of two ladies sat in a bench in a park being arrested, and is that the police being overzealous?
Oh, undoubtedly so. And, of course, certain police officers would love the opportunity to be a bit more authoritarian than they would be at other times. I think there was a lack of police leadership in terms of setting the tone. I don't think they really kind of read the mentality and the mindset of the nation because people overwhelmingly were abiding by the legislation. People were staying in their homes. People were abiding by the rules. But there was an element of heavy-handedness that might have been brought out of that disconnect that I spoke about.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember there was even a situation where there was one lone person on a beach and another person who just went hiking on the moors, and they were both fined, I think, or arrested or something very embarrassing for the police. Who do you blame then? Is it the police, the leaders of the police, or is it the politicians for simply not explaining what they wanted properly?
Well, I would cut all of them a certain degree of slack, but in terms of setting the tone, allowing police officers or instructing police officers how to act, how to be appropriate, how to deal with this new rushed legislation that nobody had any experience of, then the responsibility for that has to lie with the police chiefs at the top, who essentially live a life of disconnected from the public, who sit in their ivory corridors of power, setting the agenda, speaking with their like-minded, university-educated, intellectual elite of policing as they see themselves, with so far removed from the public, their needs, their desires and their wishes.
All right, let's tie this into something which is obviously very topical at the moment. In terms of this row, in effect, between the Metropolitan Police and the Home Secretary, and she's being hammered by it in the papers this morning, Is it right that she's saying or being critical of the police in the way that she is, or should the police, and Mark Rowley, be left to interpret this themselves?
Well, let's just look about inconsistencies in policing in recent months, if we may. Under the leadership of Sir Mark Rowley at the Met, they, for weeks, allowed Just Stop Oil protesters to lay in the road, glue themselves to the road and cause havoc with traffic while the police stood idly by. They've changed their tactics now, but just remember how it was a few months ago. Then let's throw into the mix the coronation of King Charles III, when suddenly there was the most draconian policing you could possibly imagine, and people that had been in discussions with the police in the days and weeks leading up to the coronation turned up to do what they told the police they were going to do and found themselves arrested. You see, it's inconsistencies in policing.
Yeah, but you just said a minute ago that the police should read the room. When they attend some sort of incident, they should be able to read the room. And sometimes they get it wrong, and they can't always get it right, can they?
No, but they got it repeatedly wrong with Just Stop Oil, as I've just alluded to. And with regards to the coronation, I think many people liked the fact that that event went without a hitch almost, and that the police were very firm, and that they dealt with protesters or would-be protesters like many viewers and readers and listeners, I'm sure, would like the police to act. But then we see it being completely different. We fast forward to the pro-Palestine marches and we see inaction by the police in many regards when there are clearly people breaking the law. Now, I understand sometimes it's very difficult to arrest somebody from among a mass of 100,000 people, and you might make a bad situation worse. But why isn't that explained? Why aren't we informed properly by senior police officers that the public can engage with, rather than people in their uniforms talking down the camera and, frankly, looking like an AI robot?
So if you had to stand behind one or the other, you'd stand behind Suella Braverman, would you, on this one?
There are inconsistencies within policing, undoubtedly so. But if we talk about inconsistencies, what was absolutely staggering yesterday was listening to the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, talking about the importance of operational independence of the police. Well, there speaks a London Mayor who has interfered in the operations of police just about more than any other elected politician.
But the way you discuss it makes it sound as though it's almost an impossible problem to solve.
It's not. If only senior police officers would understand that, generally speaking, ideologically speaking, politicians of whatever persuasion hate the police. So just have that as your mindset. Of course they do. Ministers will come on the television and the radio and talk about supporting the police and doing a great job and all of that. But if you look at the political ideology of politicians, whether they come from left or right of the spectrum, to actually like and want and support an authoritarian body that enforces the law doesn't really sit with that political ideology. So if these senior police officers who get seduced by politicians and love prowling the corridors of power at Westminster, if they just realise that at the end of the day, the politicians will throw you under the bus at any opportunity, they don't like you, so when you talk about operational independence, remain independent, keep them at an arm's length, deal with them as fewer times as you possibly have to, and be there for the public. Give the police consistent policing, do what the public want, which is patrol the streets, prevent crime, investigate crime properly and professionally when it happens, and lock up bad people.
Every time you come on, I think you should take the top job, Peter. So, you tell it how it is.
Thank you.
We'll see you a little bit later on, I think. Thanks very much indeed.
Phew. After all that, you'll want to know what the weather's got in store for you.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a chilly one out there today. Most of us seeing some sunshine, but there are some heavy showers around, particularly right now across the south of England. Seeing some downpours through the night and some very gusty winds in the southwest. They too are starting to ease. So many places turning dry and bright, just a sprinkling of showers over northern Scotland and through Northern Ireland. And later this afternoon, we may see some showers returning to North Wales and northwest England. Temperature-wise, a bit chilly first thing. Pockets of frost across parts of Scotland, but temperatures by this afternoon, mostly single figures in the north. 11, maybe 12 across the south. Quite quickly this evening, temperatures will dip. We'll see more showers coming into Wales and western parts of England, and we'll keep them going through the night across northern Scotland. But for many, it'll be dry and clear. Could be some mist and fog. There'll certainly be a bit more frost around tomorrow morning, anywhere from the Midlands northwards in rural spots. And even further south, we could see a few pockets. Mist and fog could take a few hours to clear on Saturday, but it should clear. And most will have a fine day then with good spells of sunshine. Still a few showers across the far north of Scotland. One or two could just clip North Sea coast. It'll turn a bit hazy, the sunshine in the southwest later on, but for most it's dry and bright tomorrow. Good looking day. Again, 8 or 9 across the north, 11 or 12 further south. It will be a cold start to Sunday with frost and fog patches once more. Bye for now.
Well, still to come for you today, Toulouse in Toulouse. Paul Coit will have all the latest on Liverpool and, of course, VAR.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Sorry, Paul Coit's just thrown us. We won't be explaining his story a little bit later on because it's.
Good morning to Richard in Chichester, who's paid a compliment to my outfit, and Steve's haircut is very smart.
Thank you. Yeah, I had it done yesterday. It's been 8 weeks since I had a haircut, and it was getting desperate. And someone had tweeted me the other day saying, "Are you wearing a wig?"
Really? How rude.
So I went and had it chopped all off.
Well, that's
quite
definitely
like it.
not a wig.
Bit more modern. It's meant to make me look younger.
And it does.
Yeah.
Clearly it does.
Yeah, but it's worth a try, isn't it? Anyway, look, if you've just joined us, it's 6:30. Let's just remind you of the top stories this morning.
She's lost it and she's out of control. Those are the claims being made against the Home Secretary after she labelled pro-Palestine protests hate marches and accused the police of double standards. The Prime Minister is now facing pressure to sack her.
British Steel under a lot more pressure. Thousands of jobs are apparently under threat from plans to make British Steel's Scunthorpe plant go green.
A Home Secretary with no say and a police force given 16 minutes to enforce new laws. Just some of the revelations from the inquiry into the government's handling of the pandemic. Now, new WhatsApps show Matt Hancock worried that vaccine safety systems were, quote, shonky.
Whatever that means. Israel is to start daily 4-hour pauses in the fighting in northern Gaza. But the United Nations says the amount of aid getting through is just a fraction of what's needed to deal with what they're calling an intolerable humanitarian situation.
And there are just 5 weeks left to save Scotland's hospitality industry. That's the warning to Holyrood from the country's trade body, who say the sector has struggled to recover from high energy prices, lockdowns, and basically restrictions because of the pandemic.
And hundreds of Scottish water workers are going to walk out this morning in the first day of a 4-day strike following a pay and grading dispute. It's going to run for 48 days over a 3-month period. Our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, has more.
Unions are calling an emphatic mandate. 89% of membership supported action in response to Scottish water bosses bypassing long-standing collective bargaining processes in order to propose a pay rise for workers. If they agreed to a new grading system which would see some of the lowest earners lose up to £5,000 per year. Now, at the other end of the food chain, Scottish Water's annual report showed that the publicly owned firm paid 3 executives a share of £3 million each of the last 3 years, including more than £1 million in bonuses. But for now, emergency repairs, water quality checks and assisting the public with water supply, drainage and sewage will need to be on hold until Tuesday. We'll have much more on this through the day.
The world is going shonky. I've never heard shonky before.
No, very odd.
A Matt Hancock word, presumably.
Yes, he's gone wonky shonky. Who knows? Paul Coyte's always a little bit shonky, I fear.
Is it shonky or chonky?
Shonky.
Shonky. I've never heard of shonky.
No, me.
No.
Maybe it's a typo.
Do you think?
It could just be a typo. I don't think what it's meant to be.
I never said shonky.
No. Go on, what's happening in the Europa League, Mr.
In the
Coyte?
Europa League, Brighton won away at Ajax in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. It sounds like a great result, and people... I mean, it is a good result after all. I don't want to take anything away from Brighton, but Ajax have just been really terrible. I mean, they've just had the worst season they've ever had. They've changed their manager. They're looking a little better than they were. But, you know, they've gone over to Holland, beaten Ajax 2-0. Rangers won, West Ham won as well. But the other one, the big game is probably Toulouse 3, Liverpool 2.
Lose.
Yes, they lose. We can. You were the one that came up with the best one a couple of weeks ago. But anyway, it's VAR again, raising its ugly head again. The thing is, though, with VAR and all this talk about VAR, and everybody's complaining about it, video-assisted referee, is that the majority has actually been correct. Although it's taken a lot of time. We had the game on Monday everybody was complaining about. Now there was a disallowed goal right at the end of the Liverpool game. So Toulouse are 3-2 up and looking like they were going to win and not lose. And then Liverpool score a last-minute goal. You're still following me?
My head's going to explode.
Trying to, yeah.
They scored a last-minute goal and... basically, there was a handball which is about 20 seconds earlier. It just came off a chest and came off a hand, or ran down an arm onto a hand, and so then the referee went to have a look at the screen, and then they decided that actually it was handball.
Right.
Which is absolutely correct.
Was Luis Diaz playing yesterday?
Yes, he was.
Because it's good news about his father.
It is. It's fantastic news about his father. I mean, Luis Diaz. We know that his father was kidnapped. So this is nearly 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, his father and his mother were kidnapped.
Yeah,
and
he
released his mother almost on the same day. I think.
Mother was released straight away. This is Manuel Diaz, and look, there's actually footage of this here. And it turns out, from everything that I've looked into, everybody's celebrating the fact that he's come back. It had been planned for a long time because there was an election in Colombia, and it was thought that the rebels had actually known that the police would be very busy with polling stations, so this would be a good time to actually kidnap Manuel and his wife. Now, there's also not a lot that's been said, Anne, about ransom and exactly what happens. So it's actually 12 days that he'd been there. Now, whether something was paid, they do it. It's something that's happened before where they try and raise money for their cause. But it said that he's been released, everything's safe. But whether a lot of money was spent, I don't know.
No, and they probably won't say.
I don't think so. I don't think either side would be happy.
Because if it comes out that money was paid, then that just puts other people in danger, doesn't it?
Of course, and it's happened a lot over there over the years. The ELN have said, you know, we're very happy to say that we've released him safe, and so they look good. Yeah. Everybody else would look, you know, it's all very good, but I'm sure there's something else that's happened. But the main thing for Luis Diaz, who, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Can you imagine being over in Liverpool when your parents have both been kidnapped, and then he's waiting on his dad, and he's still playing football, and maybe those 90 minutes of playing football is the only release he gets from it at the time. But anyway, it's all ended up fine in the end, which is good news.
Yeah, thank heavens for that. Shonky, by the way,
yes,
is an informal Australian term, meaning dishonest, unreliable, or illegal. Especially in a devious way.
So it's shonky?
It's shonky.
Slightly shonky?
Yes.
I've got one more for you. Do you want to see the baseball shot? We've got time for the baseball?
We've got man hits ball through window.
Man hits ball through window. Ichiro is more than just a man. This is Ichiro Suzuki, Japanese baseball great. Now, look, he's already hit the ball here. And I can probably give you a little background. It's actually at a school. It's a coaching session at Ashikawa Higashi High School in Hokkaido in Japan. See, look at his face. Look at his face. I mean, this is a multi-millionaire baseball player. This is a guy who is a legend in Japan, and he's gone over to the school to give, you know, a few lessons on how to hit a baseball. There's a 26-foot high fence in front of the school, so he's gone, oh, well, this is how we do it. Anyway, smacks it, goes up. We saw it go through the window, and it actually landed in a maths class. There was actually a bunch of kids that are learning there, and then all of a sudden the ball comes through. There we are, look at that. Straight through the window, and probably the best embarrassed face you would ever see. It's probably the same face that I did when I put my football through the kitchen window when I was about 8 years old. But there we are.
Yeah, but I bet you didn't get clapped for it.
I wasn't allowed to play for another 2 weeks, so I don't think that's going to happen to me.
Oh, good on him. I quite like that.
He seems like a nice
I'm glad somebody wasn't standing right next to the window, because that ball would have come.
We don't know, maybe there was.
No, but they had a curtain down there.
Oh, was there a curtain that protected it?
So it would have just gone.
Because, you know, in the States, when they hit home runs, they get to keep the ball, so they don't throw the ball back. And sometimes, if it's an important shot, they're worth a fortune. So maybe if one of the kids got hold of the ball, it could be worth a lot of money.
Oh. There you go. It's worth knowing, you never know.
It's a little chonky, but there you go. You've got to do what you can.
Chonky.
Oh, brilliant. Paul, we'll see you later on.
Thank you.
Still to come on the programme for you this morning, lots of news coming out of Scotland this morning. A group of protesters have scaled the Parliament building in Edinburgh. Apparently we'll go through that and much more in Headline Makers in just a moment.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:41, let's go through some of the headlines today with editor of Spike Tom Slater and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. But first, shall we have a look at the front pages of the newspapers today? And the Telegraph leads with Rishi Sunak facing calls to sack the Home Secretary.
The Mail reports on the PM being warned of a Tory mutiny if he sacks Braverman.
The Guardian also leads with Sunak facing pressure to get rid of Suella Braverman.
The Mirror leads with the Home Secretary's attempts to pressure the police into banning pro-Palestinian marches.
And the Express reports, like almost all the papers this morning, on the same political drama.
Oh, dear me. So there you go. Let's start, Tom, then with you on this one. What do we make of all of this?
I have to say, I find this all a little bit strange, as far as we've had a whole week now of headlines which are just people taking offence to things that the Home Secretary has said, things that I'm sure she intended people would take offence to, so that we would be talking about her for a week. We've been kind of caught in this loop, and I think the fact that it's come to a head over a last article criticising the police for bias in terms of how it's dealing with protests is particularly strange, given of all the things she said over recent weeks and months.
Oh, the homeless tent thing.
Yeah, the lifestyle choice thing, the invasion on the South Coast. This is surely the least controversial bit. I mean, anyone who's been looking at how the police have been dealing with these protests, also just protests over the past couple of years, can see that some of them get a much easier hand than others. So I just think that even people who live and breathe to oppose Suella Braverman, I feel like maybe they're playing into her hand somewhat to clutch their pearls so firmly whenever she says anything, particularly something in this case, which is actually true.
But actually, I mean, Suella Braverman compared it to the Northern Ireland marches, and then when asked to clarify, because, I mean, obviously a lot of people in Ireland were very, very angry about it, said, oh, I don't mean the Orange marches, which some of us might feel are pretty close to hate marches. She said, I'm just talking about dissident Republicans. I mean, I mean, that whole article and the fact that it hadn't been cleared by Number 10, I mean, she's just deliberately provoking, isn't she? I mean, frankly, this is, you know, she's one of the most important people in Britain. She's supposed to be keeping peace, actually. She's in charge of the police, right? She's having a row with the Met Commissioner, and when there are problems on this march on Saturday, it's going to be because she's got the right wing. I mean, there are now going to be fights, probably.
This is what worries me. Whether, I mean, and people have said, I mean, Ian's been in touch. Morning, Ian. Says she hasn't lost it. In fact, she's the only one telling it like it is. Well, perhaps that's a fair point. But the way she's done it does mean that there is likely to be some sort of backlash, and as Scarlett says, you know, the worrying far right getting involved in some of this. Your Tommy what's-his-faces and all that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've seen an attempt for the far right to mobilise around this particular issue. Luckily, that's coming from a very pathetic, low base. And one thing that we're lucky with in this country is that the far right are very marginal and increasingly pathetic, as I suggest. I do think that some of the commentary we've seen in recent days about the fear of a kind of far right backlash, we saw it in the iPaper earlier this week, talking about that's what the Met's primary concern is about Armistice Day. I understand that, but on the other hand, if you think about the kind of deeply hateful, anti-Semitic and Islamist sort of messaging that we've seen at a lot of those marches, to turn around and think the real problem is that a handful of idiots might show up and, you know, try to defend the cenotaph, by which they mean kind of just show up to cause trouble, seems to me to get things slightly the wrong way around. You've got people calling for the destruction of the State of Israel, calling for jihad, chanting anti-Semitic slogans. And you think the worst thing about this is there might be a small, pathetic far-right backlash. That gets things slightly the wrong way around.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, you know, it's any excuse for a fight. But, I mean, also the whole thing about the far-right protecting the cenotaph, I mean, the march was never going to go anywhere near the cenotaph.
No.
It wasn't at the right time. It's been organised between the marchers and the police, right? I mean, and the British Legion, who, after all, are the people who sort of, you know, they sell us our poppies. They've said they want the march to go ahead. That's what these people died for.
OK, well, look, on that note, we're just going to take a short break from you two just to remind you of the top stories at 7:45. And she's lost it and is out of control. The claims being made against the Home Secretary after labelling pro-Palestine protesters hate marches and accused the police of double standards.
And then British Steel, but Chinese-owned. As thousands of jobs come under threat from plans to make British Steel's Scunthorpe plant go green, we're asking what this means for regional employment and Great British Steel.
And a Home Secretary with no say and a police force given 16 minutes to enforce new laws. Some of the revelations from the COVID inquiry into the government's handling of the pandemic. That's Priti Patel giving evidence. And now new WhatsApp show Matt Hancock worried that vaccine safety systems were, to quote him, shonky.
Well, we've still got Tom Slater and Scarlett Maguire with us. Scarlett, you've been looking at the Israel-Hamas situation and the fact that we're going to now see daily 4-hour pauses. Not ceasefires, but pauses.
Pauses. And pauses in northern Gaza. I mean, I hope that also means they'll stop bombing southern Gaza. And this has been... I mean, Netanyahu says that... he hopes there's going to be hostage release. But actually, the Americans were trying to go for a serious pause, or ceasefire, one almost could call it, for some time, to allow the hostages out. And what's so interesting about this is that up until now, Israeli hostages were the most important thing. I mean, they would do a prisoner swap of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli soldier. We now have... I mean, you know, over 100 hostages, old people, children. I mean, awful. And Netanyahu still won't do that serious pause so that they can try and negotiate.
Hamas has given no indication whatsoever that it's going to release those hostages if there's a
well, it is no. I mean, that's what the negotiations are going on in Qatar is about whether there will.
Yeah, but they haven't. They're not moving on it, Hamas. I mean, the last thing coming out from Hamas was that one of their leaders, like sort of deputy leader, if you like, saying in an interview, well, we didn't target civilians on October the 7th.
I know. Well, look.
How do you take them seriously?
No, you take Hamas very seriously because what they're trying to do is to completely wreck that region. I mean, they knew exactly what would happen when they did that appalling atrocity. They knew that Israel would come back and bomb Gaza. They knew that thousands of Palestinians would die. Hamas knew that, and then they knew that all the other Arab countries would get cross. I mean, this was all about completely wrecking the region, right?
So how then is Israel meant to sort of negotiate with that? Well, I mean, if Hamas wanted to do something serious, they'd release all the hostages and then let's see what happens.
We know that Hamas is never going to do anything.
No,
like
Hamas wants an impossible situation, don't they?
And that's what I think that pogrom a month ago confirmed, was the fact that this was not about some national liberation struggle as far as Hamas is concerned. This is about effectively trying to a holy war against Israel, and they really mean it. I mean, this has been in their founding documents since ever they were created, insofar as they really see this as part of some sort of existential, nihilistic struggle. You can't negotiate.
No, what do you make then, Scarlett, of all those people in Labour, including now some members of the shadow cabinet, saying there should be a ceasefire? We want Keir Starmer to back a ceasefire, which he won't do.
Well, the problem is it's sort of pragmatism versus idealism, isn't it? I mean, one can completely understand. You look at what's happening in Gaza, you look at all the deaths, you look at those children, and you think it's got to stop. And then, you know, Keir Starmer says, well, we've got to do something that's going to work. And the only thing that's going to work is actually what it's the Americans who are leading on this. And
they're beginning to sound impatient, though, aren't they?
They are beginning to sound impatient. I mean, I think they are changing. They are. I mean, but also it's the same in the States, is that there are an awful lot of people going, look at all the killings in Gaza. And of course, I mean, you're absolutely right, Stephen. I mean, they're up against this group of people who, I mean, have no morals, who are just total disruptors.
Let's change tack slightly, should we? We've got a clip I think we can show you of an Oscar-winning actor climbing the Empire State Building, Tom.
Yes, this is...
For why?
Well, what was funny about this is that at first it wasn't entirely clear why Jared Leto, he was an Oscar-winning actor, but he's also the frontman of a band called 30 Seconds to Mars. And people in Midtown Manhattan just looked up to see this Oscar-winning star in this kind of orange jumpsuit scaling the building for no apparent reason. Apparently it's to promote his band's latest album, even though that came out a couple of months ago. So it's a bit of a late promotion, and he's tried to create some sort of tenuous link between, you know, I've always found the Empire State Building so inspiring as to what one can achieve, a bit like our album. So it's a kind of a viral promotional stunt, but also one that refused to explain itself at first, which probably made it even more confusing for the people.
Presumably this has all been, like, sort of approved and is wired up and all the rest of it. I mean, he's right on the very sort of
It's
point
difficult
of
to
it.
see, but he must have a rope that he's hanging from, really.
He does. He seems to be sort of clamping himself onto things. And also, I imagine he arranged for that helicopter to
That's
take all
true,
of that footage.
yes.
But, yes, quite a strange sight for a lot of people, wouldn't they?
I wouldn't want to do that.
Still, he's
for all
brave
the-
to do it, yeah.
No,
all
I mean,
the tea and
I was going to
china.
say that even though clearly it's been planned, it's as safe as it can be. I mean, I'd be completely terrified. You know, I mean, actually, obviously he's a braver person than I am. It doesn't have the
Slightly
same.
madder.
Yeah, absolutely, very
I
mad.
mean, only slightly.
He's done very well there, hasn't he? Gosh, did he get to the top? I presume he did. I don't know.
I haven't seen it
I
confirmed,
don't
but
see
surely.
him, yeah. But
Oh, he's
it looks as though-
51.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's 51.
51 and doing that.
Crazy.
I mean, because it must be, I mean, on top of the terror, I mean, it must be completely exhausting. I mean, to pull yourself up.
Be very fit to just do it.
Yes.
Yeah. Have we got time to talk about the how to get a really good sleep?
Oh, yes, we like to talk about it.
When you work in breakfast television, it's all you ever think about is how to get
Literally.
decent sleep.
Yeah, well, I also think that women of a certain age, everybody I talk to wakes up in the middle of the night for an hour or so.
Yes.
It's just completely mad. And people keep saying to me, no, you just have to take sleeping pills.
Well, and rather than fight it, I think you just have to get up and make a cup of tea or something.
Right, read your
into
book.
it.
Absolutely, no. So sleep is a real problem, and it does really get to me when you go, you know, how to stay young, sleep properly, and you think, yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I mean, all
totally.
of us would. So what it says is that you should have a cup of coffee and a glass of wine.
What, together?
Well, no, coffee during the morning, wine in the evening, and then they sort of between them. I mean, I have to say, I'm somebody who, provided I get it right, which I didn't on Wednesday night.
Oh yes,
Far too much. But I find that a couple of glasses, 2 or 3 glasses of wine, actually does make for a better sleep.
See,
I know this isn't supposed to happen.
I would pay good money, Scarlett Maguire, to see you staggering round the streets of London when you've overdone it like that. I bet that'd be worth anyone's money for TikTok.
I wasn't even staggering. It was waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, oh, my God.
Oh, what about
No,
What did I do
fine.
last night?
I was absolutely fine when I was there.
There's a whole article in one of the papers in the middle of the week about how to get a perfect sleep. And they say it's to have a hot bath and then go straight to bed.
Oh.
Yeah, actually, I think that's
And
really
I think that may
good.
work, yeah.
Hot bath and the glass of wine together.
Yes.
Now we're talking
Yes,
about
You sound like a hot bath in the morning. Because it helps me to wake up. Then.
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're peculiar.
Yeah, you are peculiar, Stephen.
I am peculiar. I can't deny it.
We'd love to hear how do you get a decent night's sleep? Is it a glass of wine? Is it something else? Or is it a hot bath? I don't know. I think we need to know.
Something else?
I didn't mean that. Stephen Dixon, stop it.
Honestly, what I have to work with. It's terrible. Anyway, on that note, Tom Slater, Scarlett Maguire, thank you very much indeed. We shall see you a little bit later on. Let's get a check on the weather for you this morning.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a chilly one out there today. Most of us seeing some sunshine, but there are some heavy showers around, particularly right now across the south of England. Seeing some downpours through the night and some very gusty winds in the southwest. They too are starting to ease. So many places turning dry and bright, just a sprinkling of showers over northern Scotland and through Northern Ireland. And later this afternoon, we may see some showers returning to North Wales and northwest England. Temperature-wise, a bit chilly first thing, pockets of frost across parts of Scotland, but temperatures by this afternoon, mostly single figures in the north, 11, maybe 12 across the south. Quite quickly this evening, temperatures will dip. We'll see more showers coming into Wales and western parts of England, and we'll keep them going through the night across northern Scotland. But for many, it'll be dry and clear. Could be some mist and fog. There'll certainly be a bit more frost around tomorrow morning, anywhere from the Midlands northwards in rural spots. And even further south, we could see a few pockets. Mist and fog could take a few hours to clear on Saturday, but it should clear. And most will have a fine day then with good spells of sunshine. Still a few showers across the far north of Scotland. One or two could just clip North Sea coast. It'll turn a bit hazy, the sunshine in the southwest later on, but for most it's dry and bright tomorrow. Good looking day. Again, 8 or 9 across the north, 11 or 12 further south. It will be a cold start to Sunday with frost and fog patches once more. Bye for now.
Frost.
Wet and windy and horrible.
Isn't it just? Loads of you getting in touch on Suella Braverman. Bit of a mix of views.
Yeah, Tony says the Prime Minister should sack her. She's achieved almost nothing apart from wasting money on migrant hotels, calling the homeless a lifestyle choice, and now blaming the police. Basically, everyone else's fault other than hers.
David, though, says, I think Suella is only saying what the majority of England is thinking.
Yeah, well, I've heard that a lot as well, yes. A lot of people are very refreshed by the fact that at last you've got a politician who speaks her mind rather than just always says what is, meant to be acceptable.
Joanne says Suella's article was inciting violence and division. Can't we have someone who is more capable of speaking with sensitivity? Which may be a fair point. But then Ian...
Is sensitivity what you want, though?
I don't know. I mean, Ian, as I reflected earlier on, says she hasn't lost it. She's only telling it like it is. So it's a tough one. And I sort of had one view. Listening to Peter Blexley earlier on makes me think, maybe I need to change my mind. So I just don't know. Which begs the question, what's the Prime Minister going to do?
Oh, he can't afford to sack her now.
I wouldn't have thought so.
Sensitive times. He just can't. It'd make him look really bad. Anyway, let us know what you think. Should Suella come or go?
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 10th of November. Today, the crows circle around Suella, but the Tory grassroots sticking by her. The Prime Minister facing pressure to sack the Home Secretary for going off script over protest politics. But could this actually boost Braverman? We're live in Westminster.
Suella Braverman's future's hanging in the balance this morning. But is it possible that she'd actually quite like to be sacked? Find out more with me very soon.
Well, should she stay or should she go? We'll help the Prime Minister make his mind up by debating that very question in just under an hour's time.
We're looking at British Steel today as thousands of jobs come under threat from plans to make their Scunthorpe plant go green. We're asking, what does it mean for regional employment and Great British Steel?
And it's all coming out now as the COVID inquiry continues to reveal the omni-shambles that went on in Whitehall. Now, new WhatsApp messages show that Matt Hancock was really worried that checks on jabs were inadequate a month after the rollout began.
And of course, we'll have a check on your weather this hour with Alex.
There's some hefty showers around right now, but for many, much of today will be dry and bright. Join me later for all the details of today's and the weekend's weather.
And of course, Paul Coit is here with your latest sport.
Yes, Liverpool lose in Toulouse. We've got more VAR. And also, do you remember Kamila Valieva, 15-year-old ice skater, caught doping at the Olympics last year? Well, she has her case at the Court of Arbitration for Sport held today.
Paul, thank you. Good morning, I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
I'm always intrigued when these issues come up, where people are absolutely split down the middle. Because how are you meant to come to any conclusion?
Well, that's it. And I think with Rishi Sunak, I mean, it's almost like half his party wanted to go, but half wanted to stay and will consider him weak either way.
Yeah. Fred says she has my full support, unlike her boss.
Yeah. And Mark says, why would the Prime Minister sack Suella Braverman for telling the absolute truth about the Met Police?
Though, Joanne, I've read this before, Suella's article was inciting violence and division.
But we'll never know. I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever happens tomorrow, and, you know, you can only pray that there will be no problems at all. But, for instance, if it's a totally quiet day and everything goes ahead well and peacefully, we'll never know whether that's anything to do with Suella Braverman speaking out and being, being very forceful with the police. And if there's trouble tomorrow, will it be her fault, or would it have happened anyway?
Yeah. Will it be the police's fault?
You'll just never know, and that's why I don't think Rishi Sunak could possibly sack her.
Also, I do think there's this very difficult situation where it's part of having freedom, isn't it, that you allow people who you disagree with to protest.
And that's what the British Legion have said.
Yes,
the people who sell us poppies, they actually say that they feel that the protest should go ahead because that's the very freedoms that a lot of people died to give us.
It's interesting, isn't it? But the Home Secretary's future really is, got to say, hanging in the balance
yes,
today.
It could go either way. She was writing in The Times, Suella Braverman not only accused the police of giving pro-Palestinian demonstrators special treatment, she apparently did so without the Prime Minister's approval.
Well, for the Home Secretary to do it is astonishing, just because of the sort of rules and regulations, if you like. But the Prime Minister says he has every confidence in her. That's not really a good sign, it has to be said. But calls for her to be sacked haven't gone away. Here's Keir Starmer.
He must know that this isn't the way in which a Home Secretary should behave. He must know in himself that the role of responsible government is to reduce tension and to support the police in difficult decisions that they have to make. He's got a Home Secretary who's out of control, and he is too weak to do anything about it. That's the worst of all combinations. And that's why across the country, repeatedly people are coming up to me and saying, we just need change now. We've just had enough of this.
Well, let's remind ourselves then of Suella Braverman's recent remarks that have led some Conservative MPs to say she's unhinged.
Yes, she's been criticised for using phrases like invasion and hurricane of migrants coming to the UK.
And a week ago, another intervention. The pro-Palestinian demonstrations were hate marches.
And now, in this article, she's accused the police force of applying double standards to its policing of protests.
She claimed aggressive right-wing protesters were rightly met with a stern response, whilst pro-Palestinian mobs were largely ignored.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who's in our Westminster studio for us this morning. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because does she actually want to get fired? Is this all part of a leadership bid?
Well, those are the rumours that are flying around Westminster at the moment. It seems very strange that the Home Secretary chose to directly ignore requests from Number 10 to edit that piece that she wrote in the Times. She adhered to some of the comments that Number 10 made, but other edits that they requested were left unamended. Now, some say that it is the job of the Home Secretary to support the police in public, even if she's criticising them in private. Here, Suella Braverman clearly criticised them very publicly and ignored requests to tone that down. Could it be that Suella Braverman is thinking about her own post-election future? As we saw at the Conservative Party conference a month ago, lots of cabinet ministers now seem to be trying to make themselves look like future leaders. They know that after the next election, the Conservatives probably won't be in power. They know that Rishi Sunak will almost certainly step aside, and it could be their moment in the sun. Now, could it be that Suella Braverman, who is on the right of the party, thinks that following the next election, there will be a backlash from those also on the right of the party, those of right-wing persuasion generally in the country, who believe that the Conservatives lost the election because they weren't right-wing enough. If that's the case, a right-wing leader will take over the Conservative Party. And it could be that she would be in the perfect position to do just that if she had managed to gain that sort of political martyrdom, if you like, by being sacked by the Prime Minister for speaking out what she sees as a truth which all voters acknowledge in their heart of hearts. So it could be that the Home Secretary would quite like not to be the Home Secretary in the dying days of this failing government, so that in the first days of a new Labour government, she can pitch herself as a really powerful leader of the opposition.
It's a very risky strategy, though, isn't it? I mean, we can tell just from the comments we're getting from our own viewers this morning that she's dividing almost, 50-50 views. And it's like that within the party, isn't it? I mean, half the party like her and feel that she's an old-fashioned Tory, but half the party really don't.
Well, absolutely. She is Marmite within the Conservative Party. It's thought that there are around 40 or 50 Conservative MPs who are very, very loyal to Suella Braverman, those who supported her during the leadership contest last year. And they would probably kick up a fuss if she were to be kicked out of the party, which is something, of course, which Rishi Sunak has to bear in mind. Sometimes when there is a troublemaker, it's better to have them within the tent, if you like, rather than outside of it, causing trouble. So that certainly will be a consideration that Rishi Sunak will be bearing in mind. But as you say, there are 40 or 50 MPs who support her. There are also just as many, if not more, who think that she's trouble, who've said openly that they think she is unhinged, who think she's behaving in a way that just isn't respectable for a Conservative Home Secretary. So yes, when it comes to a leadership contest, it could be that she has alienated far too many people from within the Conservative Party. And remember, of course, that the parliamentary party really matters in these leadership elections. It could be that she's alienated too many people. That said, she might think it's just worth the risk. She believes this. She is right-wing to her very core. Everything she comes out with isn't just a ploy. It's not just throwing red meat to the voters. She really does believe this. And if she can be the one person who stands on that platform, who rises above the other right-wing cabinet ministers, Kemi Badenoch, for instance, then she might think it's worth that risk. It's worth alienating some of her colleagues if she can get a really loyal support base on side, both within the parliamentary party and among the wider voters.
Yeah, but this is a gift to Keir Starmer, isn't it? We just played a clip from him, and he's totally right, isn't he? Because he says, whatever you think of the Home Secretary, he says the Prime Minister's too weak to get rid of her. Well, that's a reality, isn't it? Because if he was to sack her, that actually undermines him.
Well, absolutely. I mean, Rishi Sunak is now in a lose-lose situation. If he sacks the Home Secretary just before the Rwanda legislation gets the Supreme Court, that Rwanda legislation where migrants who come to the UK illegally would be deported instantly to Rwanda while their claim would be processed, that policy has been championed by Suella Braverman. He doesn't want to lose his Home Secretary now. He doesn't want to lose his Home Secretary the day before these protests begin. But then, obviously, if he doesn't sack her, it could look as though he's very, very weak. She has essentially undermined his authority by refusing to comply with Number 10's edits to that piece. And does he really want a Home Secretary who is prepared to do that, potentially, in order to steal his job after the next election? So neither way looks particularly good for the Prime Minister. And of course, one way or the other, he's got to make a definitive judgment pretty quickly. At the moment, he's saying he has full faith in the Home Secretary. But he's really got to stand up and say, yes, I stand behind exactly what Suella Braverman did. It doesn't matter that she didn't sign off those edits if he's to keep her. Because the longer he leaves this sort of festering, the more Keir Starmer will stick in the knife and say that he just simply isn't strong enough, that he's a weak leader who can't even control the ranks of his own party. And if he can't do that, then the argument, of course, is, well, how is he going to control the country?
And I guess a lot will depend then on the way the marches go tomorrow, how the police react, whether there's problems at all. Because if it's bad, I suppose he could then blame her for it, couldn't he?
Yeah, there is an argument that he could blame her. I mean, tensions are very inflamed already. There are those who argue that Suella Braverman, with this article, has essentially poured petrol on those flames, and however the Metropolitan Police respond will be the subject of huge scrutiny and probably of criticism. So yes, it could be that he waits until after the weekend, and then if everything does turn out to be an absolute mess, then he could sack the Home Secretary. Of course, that's not a particularly simple route to go down, because if things do get really, really bad tomorrow and he then takes the route of blaming the Home Secretary and getting rid of her, then everyone will say, well, hang on a minute, if you knew that she had inflamed those tensions, then why didn't you sack her before the weekend and perhaps ameliorate some of the damage? So no option is particularly straightforward for him now.
No, it's a real lose-lose situation,
Yeah,
isn't
it is. Olivia, for now, thanks very much indeed.
Yeah.
Now, thousands of jobs could go at British Steel's Scunthorpe plant. Ministers are now coming under pressure to protect employment and guarantee that steel can continue to be made in the UK.
In fact, the company is Chinese-owned, and they've confirmed that they plan to replace blast furnaces with 2 electric arc versions, which can apparently run on zero-carbon electricity. They're still waiting for what they call appropriate support from the UK government, though. Our reporter Anna Riley has the story.
British Steel has been the heartbeat of Scunthorpe for 160 years, creating employment for the local community. But times have changed. Now its blast furnaces are set to go electric to make steel production here greener by recycling scrap steel. And that could cost 2,000 people their jobs, as well as leaving the UK without the ability to produce its own virgin steel, with ministers pushing for reassurances if the government is to finance the scheme.
If we're going to give hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to British Steel, we have to ensure that we protect steel jobs and that we retain a blast furnace steel-making capability in Scunthorpe. We can't do anything without steel as a nation. Nobody can.
If thousands of jobs are lost at the plant in Scunthorpe, this will have a huge knock-on effect to the local economy, which relies on trade from steel workers. Businesses like Beck Bakery, who sell the majority of food to staff from the plant.
Most of our trade is from the workers,
from workmen,
either the British Steel or the contractors, that work on British Steel. I would say 90% of it is.
People here have faced years of uncertainty around the steelworks. They're used to cuts. But this feels different. The blast furnaces are the steelworks.
We make the best steel in the world. We always have them. Tyre cord, rail and everything. It's a steel industry. I don't know how you can go green with a steel industry.
Scunthorpe, it'll be like a museum. It'll be no good at all.
It's been British Steel and it's been here donkey's years.
And we're down to the last one. We're down to the last steelworks here. And that'll be the end of it then.
It's inevitable. The steelworks has got to move forward, and it's progress, and that unfortunately, sadly for jobs, that's what's happening.
British Steel, along with the council, have also announced plans for an advanced manufacturing park on part of the steelworks site, which could create thousands of green jobs, such as in hydrogen.
It seems a little bit callous to think that you'll try and redesign new jobs and all at the same time as other people are going to have to change theirs. But we've got to have a solid future for kids in this area to want to stay in this area. We want better paid jobs and high engineering jobs, that sort of stuff. And that's what we want for the future for local people.
British Steel's proposals will be reviewed by an external specialist on behalf of trade unions. If plans go ahead, the blast furnaces will remain operational until electric arc furnace installation from late 2025. Anna Riley, GB News, Scunthorpe.
Well, we've got some breaking news right now on the economy. Let's cross live to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan. And a very good morning, Liam. Tell us the latest news.
Morning, Anne. Morning, Stephen. We've got the GDP numbers. What does that mean? That's the overall size of the economy. And I wouldn't say it's great news, but it's not particularly bad news. A lot of people were expecting the UK economy to contract in the third quarter. That's July, August and September. And if you get two successive quarters where the economy is contracting or getting smaller, that's what we call a recession. Well, it turns out the UK economy, which grew 0.2% in the second quarter between April and June, was flatlining between July and September, 0% growth. A lot of people were expecting a contraction. It didn't happen. So it's not amazing news, but it could have been a lot worse. And what we're seeing is the economy flatlining. This, I think, Anne and Stephen, is why the Bank of England didn't raise interest rates this month or last month. We've had 14 successive rate rises, but it does now seem that rates have peaked. So the UK economy is flat. And part of the reason for that is that manufacturing is flat, as reflected in Anna Riley's excellent report there from Scunthorpe about the steelworks.
So how do we then get to, or not us, how does the government get to a point where actually the economy can, right, thankfully it's not going down, but how do we make it grow?
Well, let's go back to the mini budget, shall we, and all the controversy about Liz Truss. She was trying to keep taxation low. She was trying to cut regulation on businesses and make it easier for firms to invest in order to get the economy moving. Of course, a lot of people rejected those plans and financial markets thought she was trying to do too much too soon in terms of playing fast and loose with the public finances. This really is the central conundrum of politics, Stephen, and the whole election will be fought on this when it happens. How do we get the economy growing? The implications for ordinary folk, households trying to make ends meet, and the broader cost of living crisis. Look, let's just reflect on Scunthorpe. What should the government do? British Steel, of course, is no longer owned by anyone from the UK. In March 2020, British Steel was bought by the Chinese, by the Xinji Group. The Chinese now make half of all steel in the world. They make 1 billion metric tons of steel. In this country, we make just 7 million tons of metric tons of steel, just a drop in the ocean. And what's at stake here in Scunthorpe is 2,000 jobs. The British steel industry still employs 35,000 people across the country, not least in Port Talbot, in Wales, in Scunthorpe, in Lincolnshire, in the northeast. And if this blast furnace is turned off in Scunthorpe, as the locals will tell you, and anyone who knows the steel industry will tell you, they can't then make what we call virgin steel. They can't make fresh steel. They can only repurpose scrap steel. That's what arc electric furnaces do, as opposed to blast furnaces. Though, of course, arc electric furnaces can use renewable electricity from turbines and so on. So ministers can tell themselves that they're promoting the green economy. So there's an awful lot at stake here, not just in terms of jobs, but also in terms of the strategic ability of the UK to run its economy. Infrastructure projects, so much of what we do in life, building wind turbines themselves, building railways, building buildings. It needs lots and lots and lots of steel. And if we lose the ability to create what we call that virgin steel in the UK, then that makes the UK a lot less strategically independent. So GDP growth is flat. It could have been worse. But I'd say where our focus should be today is on what's happening in Scunthorpe. What should the government do to promote growth? Should it bail out the steelworks? Should it give money to a massively wealthy Chinese conglomerate? Or should it let that Chinese conglomerate close down that blast furnace in Scunthorpe, in turn closing down thousands of local jobs?
Well, I suppose a lot of people might hear you say that and say, why did we sell it to the Chinese in the first place?
Because British investors wouldn't come forward. That's why, Anne, because there wasn't enough kind of entrepreneurial zeal to tap into the reality that we've got some fantastic steelmakers in the UK. We've got an incredible heritage of steelmaking in the UK. You know, you saw that in Anna's excellent report, those old photos of families who've been making steel in that part of Lincolnshire for generations, and yet British entrepreneurs, British pension funds, insurance companies, our big institutional investors, they would not come forward and invest. And the Chinese put the money on the table. It was in the depths of, or the beginning of lockdown. Almost no one noticed what was going on because obviously lockdown was about to start back in March 2020. And the Chinese bought that massively strategic company. Some of us warned at the time that that shouldn't happen. And of course, in Port Talbot, it's Tata, an Indian company. And what both these companies are trying to do, they've got their hands out trying to get money from the government to subsidise their commercial activities, because they know the government will be now loath to hear people like me on the telly saying, gosh, you're going to lose all these thousands of jobs and this is strategically really bad for the UK economy. So this is what big companies do. They sort of play Russian roulette with the government. Are you going to give us the money to bail this out so you don't have to take the political hit from this? So there's big strategic issues here at stake. I personally think the government will come forward and try and save this steelworks at Scunthorpe, at least save the blast furnace, because jobs are tied up with that, as well as the strategic ability to make, as I said, what we call virgin steel, steel from, you know, from first principles, rather than relying on scrap metal, frankly, repurposed steel, which is what electric arc furnaces do, as opposed to those traditional blast furnaces.
OK. Liam, for now, thanks very much indeed. Look, it's 7:22. Let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning.
Well, Israel is going to begin daily 4-hour pauses in northern Gaza as heavy fighting rages on. But the UN says the amount of aid getting through is a mere fraction of what's really needed to deal with what they call intolerable humanitarian problems.
Just 5 weeks left to save Scotland's hospitality industry. That's a warning to Holyrood from the country's trade body, which says the sector has struggled to recover from high energy prices, lockdowns and pandemic-era restrictions.
And staying north of Hadrian's Wall, hundreds of Scottish water workers are to walk out this morning in what marks the first day of 3 months of disruption. GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has more.
Unions are calling an emphatic mandate. 89% of membership supported action in response to Scottish water bosses bypassing long-standing collective bargaining processes in order to propose a pay rise for workers. If they agreed to a new grading system which would see some of the lowest earners lose up to £5,000 per year. Now, at the other end of the food chain, Scottish Water's annual report showed that the publicly owned firm paid 3 executives a share of £3 million each of the last 3 years, including more than £1 million in bonuses. But for now, emergency repairs, water quality checks and assisting the public with water supply, drainage and sewage will need to be on hold until Tuesday. We'll have much more...
We cut Tony off there.
We did. Yes.
Apologies. Apologies. Actually, I was just saying, because we heard what he had to say an hour ago. I was just thinking, he's got a very Scottish accent. I don't know what part of Scotland. If you're from the same area, you know what his accent is.
Don't know.
Because it's so. I love these regional, so rich and joyous,
no, it's lovely.
really.
It is joyous, yes, absolutely.
Love all of
So,
it.
yeah, if you know what part... we'll have to ask him what part of Scotland he's from.
Yeah, but it's just such... I love all that. I'm a northerner, so... we've got him live in an hour, so maybe we'll...
We can
have
ask
time,
him then.
We'll ask
yeah,
him.
absolutely.
Should we talk COVID? Dear me, the inquiry is going on, of course, more and more getting revealed about chaotic scenes in government during the pandemic.
Well, the former Home Secretary, Dame Priti Patel, told the inquiry that the coronavirus laws were highly confusing and complex, both for the police and the public, and that the £10,000 fines were disproportionate.
She also made it clear to the inquiry that Matt Hancock's Department for Health and Social Care was responsible for COVID laws, saying the Home Office had very little say in it all.
Well, the former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley joins us now. And it is fascinating what's coming out of the COVID inquiry. It just seems to be such chaos amongst the politicians, but also for the police.
Yes, because they had to deal with laws that were passed very quickly, rushed through Parliament, and then all of a sudden they had to impose those laws upon the public. In fact, there was one example yesterday when the government had 16 minutes notice, or the police did, from the law being passed to actually having to enforce that law. So it was very challenging for them, very difficult, and of course they didn't always get it right.
So who's to blame for that? Because I mean, look, we all found it very confusing. It's got to be honest, it was really confusing. It almost seemed to be changing on a daily basis at times. So we most of us at least, tried our best. However, should the politicians have made it clearer to the police what was actually happening?
Well, decisions were made in such a short space of time and so rapidly. And, of course, they changed as the virus changed. So the rules would change, so the laws would change. And the police were often playing catch-up. Those who sit at the National Police Chiefs Council, who are responsible for really giving directives as to how to enforce any given law, didn't have the time to do that. And with laws, of course, generally speaking, they get passed and there are test cases. So the law shifts and changes and moves because it's an ever-evolving thing. With this completely unique set of circumstances that the police were suddenly confronted with, they didn't have those opportunities.
Well, there clearly was no time to reflect. I mean, the one that you were mentioning there, where there was 16 minutes in between the law being made and the police being expected to carry it out, there's no time to reflect on whether that would even work. No time for police chiefs to say, hang on a minute, that's not going to be practical.
Absolutely. The ink had barely dried on the paper. And there we were expecting frontline police officers to go out on the street and enforce these laws. Well, it's hardly surprising that they sometimes got it wrong, including sort of notable cases where two women in Derbyshire were sharing a coffee and walking suitably distanced and the such like. And some heavy-handed policing handed out tickets to those women, only for those tickets later to be rescinded. And of course, under the coronavirus legislation, we had the Sarah Everard Vigil on Clapham Common, which attracted a huge amount of publicity, rightfully so, and, it has to be said, some heavy-handed policing, where the police clearly failed to get the public mood right, to appreciate the shock and horror of an abysmal and appalling series of crimes that had been committed by one of their own. Now, in that regard, senior police officers clearly got it fundamentally wrong, and that filters down to the frontline cops who we saw unceremoniously handcuffing women, having placed them on the ground and then dragging them off in a very undignified and inappropriate way.
What this all highlights, though, is a inappropriate or lack of communication between government and police, which is the argument now we're having over the protests planned for tomorrow, the pro-Palestine protests. I mean, what's your perspective as someone who's walked the beat for many a year? Is the Home Secretary right to say the police aren't doing what they should be doing? They should be sort of working harder, pressure on them to ban the protests? Or should she stay out of it and let the police be operationally independent?
That's the key phrase, operational independence, which the police treasure and often go onto the media to talk about the importance of it all. But it is, of course, rather naive in this day and age to think that they are going to be allowed a free hand with that independence. But if we talk about operational independence, we need to talk about political independence. And what I mean by that is, people may not know, but Sir Mark Rowley, when he was out of policing, he retired and then came back to take the Commissioner's job, wrote a book. It was a novel. And on the front of that novel, there was an endorsement from Amber Rudd, the former Home Secretary. So clearly, Sir Mark Rowley, he who has got on bent knee and had a sword tapped on both shoulders, very much an establishment person, must have had some form of relationship with clearly a Tory former Home Secretary.
Well, that's not surprising, though, is it? Because the Home Secretary's sort of in charge of the police.
But if you're going to have operational independence, then there needs to be political independence. And Sir Mark Rowley clearly has some kind of link to a former Tory Home Secretary. So if I were to be a part of the panel interviewing him for the job of Commissioner, I can hear people laughing just at the prospect of that now. Of course, that would never happen. That would have been a question that I would have put to him. If you want to be in a role where you're going to argue for operational independence, how can we be assured, how can the public be assured that you are politically independent? Because your book was endorsed by a former Tory Home Secretary.
Yeah, he's got a difficult job to do, though. When he was asked to if they could ban the protests, he said he couldn't see any reason to do so. Was he right or wrong?
Well, the bar has to be very set very high for the Commissioner to go to the Home Secretary and ask for such a march to be banned. The gathering can't be banned. That is sacrosanct. That is protected by a raft of legislation. So the gathering that will take place tomorrow at Hyde Park could not be banned in any way, shape or form. The march that will happen from Hyde Park to the US Embassy, which is now south of the river at a place called Nine Elms, that could be, but only if there was a very serious risk or threat of large-scale violence and disorder. And it would appear at the moment, according to how the police tell us, that that bar has not been met yet. Let's hope it isn't, because I think banning the march could possibly create more problems than it will actually solve. Although, on that note, I have to say, as a proud former employee of the Metropolitan Police, that once world-renowned organisation was reduced this week to writing a begging letter to the organisers of the Palestinian March, saying, please don't hold your event. Now that really, I think, was perceived by many as a sign of weakness.
Yeah, they shouldn't have done that anyway.
Absolutely not. It was ridiculous how anybody could have signed that off or agreed with it. And these are the highest-ranking police officers in the land that they thought to do that, because how was it perceived, particularly by people on the far right of politics, some with a very colourful history, including criminality? It was perceived as a sign of weakness. Because they thought maybe the police are not going to protect the cenotaph. Maybe they won't protect Remembrance Sunday. And of course, that's where we've heard rumblings and calls to arms for those people to turn up tomorrow.
What about the allegations that the police are sort of use a light touch with some of these protesters? Because what's always struck me about that is the idea that if you have 100,000 people, for example, and something is going on in there which isn't right, you know, calls for Hamas or whatever it might be, but how can you police that? How can you go in and arrest these individuals when you are surrounded by tens of thousands of people?
It is hugely, hugely challenging. And of course, what you do when you effect an arrest of somebody there, you take a number of police officers away from policing that protest. Because not only does the person have to have hands laid on them, be removed, and sometimes if people don't want to come quietly, you might have to have an officer on each limb and one on the head and shoulders. And of course, you have to kind of form a corridor to be able to excavate that person from the throng strong from the masses, and that requires police officers. They've then got to be taken to some form of transport and then taken away to a detention or charging centre, for example, a custody suite, all of which takes up valuable police resources. One arrest can lead to a number of police officers no longer being there effectively to deal with the protest or the gathering. What the Met have done in the last 4 weeks, and I think with some justification, not round public support, but some justification, they will be able to pat themselves on the back for the last 4 Saturdays because there's been huge gatherings and there's not been a massive outbreak of violence. The Strand hasn't been smashed. Trafalgar Square hasn't been trashed. We've not had rioting. And in that regard, due credit, I think, should be paid to them. But of course, that doesn't by any stretch of the imagination lessen the anger that some of the public have when they see people clearly breaking the law and not being arrested there and then.
Do you think the media is somewhere here to blame for allowing this to be whipped up into a frenzy over tomorrow? Because, as you said, the demonstrations have been largely peaceful for the last 4 Saturdays. Tomorrow, though, it's the media sort of seem to have pointed out that it's Remembrance Weekend. Sensitivities are very high. And it's now front page on every newspaper that there could be trouble tomorrow. I mean, the more we talk it up, the more likely it is to happen.
Well, let me deal with the largely peaceful comment that you just made. I would like to point out that the police officers have been injured on each and every Saturday that these marches have taken place. And each police officer that gets injured, you know, has a family, may have to have protracted length of time off work. And, of course, one person was jailed swiftly for headbutting a police officer at one of these demos. So, largely peaceful is not perhaps something I would entirely buy into, although I do accept that the majority of people have gone there and behaved themselves. But in these last few weeks, there has been an escalation in all aspects. The number of arrests have crept up. The number of police officers, you know, sometimes has crept up. And consequently, I think that there is a fear that things might escalate tomorrow. As for whether the media are to blame or not, the media are there to report. And I am here to comment. I do not blame newspapers, television shows or radio channels if people choose to turn up tomorrow and be disruptive. That will be the choice of the individuals. That is down to them. They are not being called to arms by newspapers. They are being called to arms by right-wing people, one very notorious person who has a number of criminal convictions.
OK, Peter, we've got to leave it there. Good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Well, do keep your views coming into us, won't you? gbviews@gbnews.com. Right now, let's catch up with what the weather has in store for us.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a chilly one out there today. Most of us seeing some sunshine, but there are some heavy showers around, particularly right now across the south of England. Seeing some downpours through the night and some very gusty winds in the southwest. They too are starting to ease. So many places turning dry and bright, just a sprinkling of showers over northern Scotland and through Northern Ireland. And later this afternoon, we may see some showers returning to North Wales and northwest England. Temperature-wise, a bit chilly first thing, pockets of frost across parts of Scotland, but temperatures by this afternoon, mostly single figures in the north, 11, maybe 12 across the south. Quite quickly this evening, temperatures will dip. We'll see more showers coming into Wales and western parts of England, and we'll keep them going through the night across northern Scotland. But for many, it'll be dry and clear. Could be some mist and fog. There'll certainly be a bit more frost around tomorrow morning, anywhere from the Midlands northwards in rural spots. And even further south, we could see a few pockets. Mist and fog could take a few hours to clear on Saturday, but it should clear. And most will have a fine day then with good spells of sunshine. Still a few showers across the far north of Scotland. 1 or 2 could just clip North Sea coast. It'll turn a bit hazy, the sunshine in the southwest later on, but for most it's dry and bright tomorrow. Good looking day. Again, 8 or 9 across the north, 11 or 12 further south. It will be a cold start to Sunday with frost and fog patches once more. Bye for now.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
7:42. So, is the Home Secretary out of control? That's in a lot of the headlines this morning. Let's debate this with Royal broadcaster and historian Rafe Hedel-Mankou and our own senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Morning to you two. Nigel, what do you think?
Yes, she is. And at the moment, Rishi Sunak has got every reason to sack her. For breaching collective responsibility by not carrying out the changes to her article he asked for, and also the ministerial code for not actually clearing it with the number 10 press office. Whether or not he's strong enough to actually do so, that's another matter.
Rafe, what do you think? I mean, a lot of people are getting in touch with us saying, at last we've got a Home Secretary who, opens her mouth but actually speaks the truth. What do you think?
Suella Braverman is one of the few voices that actually does reflect, as you just said, the concerns not only just of Conservative Party members, but actually of the majority of the population. I mean, we've had polling out that shows that a majority, or half the British nation, wants to ban this march outright, which means that even more than half, the majority of the nation, is against the whole idea, whether or not they want to ban it or not. And we've had so many briefings against Mrs. Braverman by her colleagues. I think it's important that we remember how unrepresentative our representatives actually are, because, we've had research from Professor Matt Goodwin and others that show us
that Tory MPs as a group are to the left of Tory party members and completely out of touch with many of their concerns, but actually on certain key issues, they're also to the left of the wider population. You just have to remember, like Gillian Keegan saying it was fine to change your gender at the age of 16, for example. There are so many Tory MPs who are selected by central office rather than local constituencies who are just cuckoos in the Conservative nest. And if they actually reflected the views of the public on these issues, like Suella Braverman is doing, they would be doing far better in the polls. And to fire Suella now would just simply serve as another reminder of the feelings of many that this is a Conservative party in name only, and it doesn't represent them.
So, Nigel, is she playing a sensible game in one sense? She may be breaking the conventions, the political rules, if you like, but if she is reflecting what people think, well, as far as she's concerned, that's got to be for the good.
Well, she is the Home Secretary, bear in mind, and what her job should be is to calm things down before tomorrow's march rather than ratchet them up. And what she is doing at the moment is, as Olivia rightly said earlier, is fanning the flames that could make tomorrow worse than it's likely to be. There could be counter demonstration, and she's kind of giving a license for that. And those are the dangers that where she should be at this stage supporting the police. She's then upsetting them as well, along with a load of other people. Now, this is not the job of the Home Secretary. It's not just, she's not there to reflect whatever public opinion might be. She's there to do a job to keep Britain safe.
Rafe, she's not keeping Britain safe. In fact, her words are just likely to cause more trouble. What do you say to that?
Oh, in fact, I don't think Suella Braverman is out of control. I think the police are actually out of control. And it's about time someone called them up on this. You know, you remember that famous World War I poster, Daddy, what did you do during the Great War? You know, when I think Suella knows that basically this government is done for. Whatever happens, she's going to be out of government and out of Parliament in the next year. And so, you know, when we do watch Labour drive social cohesion further into the ground in this country, if people ask her, well, what did you do to stop all this? She'd at least be able to say, well, I didn't compromise my beliefs. I refused to stay silent. And I spoke out to voice the feelings of the public. Now, I don't think that's enough. You know, she is Home Secretary, and, you know, just making rhetoric and sound bites and articles hasn't gone far enough. She has never really delivered, be it immigration or be it on the police. She could have been a more active voice all this time in calling for real reform into how they actually police these issues. But her speaking out is better than nothing, and it at least opens up a space for all of us, as we're doing right now, to have an open and frank discussion about these issues, particularly about the fact that many people in this country think the police no longer represent them. And people like Jews don't feel safe on the streets. And that's an important contribution she's given us.
OK, we've got to leave it there, gents. I'm sorry. Rafe, Nigel, thanks very much indeed. Let's rapidly move on, should we, to the sport this morning with Paul Coit. Morning, Paul.
Good morning. Quick word on what happened last night. Brighton beat Ajax in Amsterdam 2-0, so a good result for them, although Ajax haven't been too great. Interesting, now Liverpool lost in Toulouse. They did lose on Toulouse. 3-2 was the score. There was a VAR incident towards the end where it looked like they got an equaliser, but then it was the VAR. It's been a whole week of VAR. Interestingly, though, on VAR, the big one was Newcastle versus Arsenal on Saturday, where Mikel Arteta was absolutely livid about the fact that the goal was given. There were 3 reasons he said that it shouldn't have been, but there was an independent panel. They call it the Premier League Independent Key Match Incident Panel. It's a catchy name. It's a catchy name, isn't it? And they looked at all 3 incidents, and Arteta, who was absolutely livid and incandescent and said that referees, it's not good enough in this country, etc., went on and said it's an absolute joke. Well, they decided that the referee was correct and Arteta was not. So I don't know how he feels about that. But VAR, still everybody talking about it. It's going on for ages, but it's actually proving to be right a lot of the time.
Yeah, OK. Paul, we'll catch you a little bit later. Thanks very much indeed.
Do join us in a couple of moments for Headline Makers. You're watching Breakfast.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience.
Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Oh, look, we're running behind schedule. It's 7:52. Let's talk to editor of Spike, Tom Slater, and former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire, our headline makers today. We're going to have a look at some lighter stuff. Just to cheer us up, this is in The Sun, Tom, this morning. If you're pie-eyed, your phone can tell.
Yes, so scientists at Stanford University in the US have come up with an app to work out whether or not you're drunk. Apparently, with a 98% success rate, it can tell. It asks you to do a kind of series of tongue twisters to try and work out the sort of level.
Enough, isn't it?
I don't think I could do that even, you know, completely stone cold sober, to be honest with you. But nevertheless, they say that 98% success rate. So of course, there's all kind of applications. Should you send this tweet? Should you send? I can't even say should. I can't even say should.
That's a good one, yes. Before you send a tweet, you have to convince them that you're not drunk. That's really cool.
Text messages. There's all kinds of applications. Maybe before you get in the car as well, so more serious things.
Well,
so, you know.
Certainly before you get in the car.
You get in the car and your car actually cross-examines you.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
and then it goes,
before I
no.
would even let you turn on the ignition,
Oh, yeah.
please say, and something like that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It'd be quite good if the car refused to turn on if you had a drink.
Yeah.
That
Well,
technology can't be far.
It will happen. It really will.
Yeah, stuff like that I like. Well, this all discovered then and created by boffins.
Boffins.
When they're not doing other things.
I like a boffin. So there's a story here, needless to say, by a dating app that says, presumably a dating app that likes intelligent people, that intelligent men are basically better in bed. That people go, oh no, you know, you're just a nerd. But I mean, actually, it makes complete sense. I mean, which is what the Star says, is that you know, they know what to do. But I mean, obviously, the thing about intelligent men, everybody knows that you know, a funny, witty, intelligent man can just seduce a woman into bed, and you just forget what they look like. So we've always known it. Men think it's about other things.
Yes, but when women are asked what makes a man sexy, they usually say it's intelligence and sense of humour. Isn't it? That's what they say.
Precisely.
Was it the boffins themselves who said it? Because I saw the headline, it was according to boffins.
Yes.
So this might be slightly self-serving, dare I say. But,
no, it says boffins best at boffin.
Oh, okay.
Yes, exhaustive research.
It has to be
exhaustive research.
Oh, by boffins.
Who's going to do the research?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, exactly.
boffins do. That's what they do. Is they research and all sorts of other things like that.
Maybe that's
and
the
it's
key.
but the question is whether it's true of, you know, when you're looking at women, when you're thinking about women, do you think, are they intelligent?
Well, I never think about women, Dara.
You never think about women.
My husband would be furious.
Yes,
They're barking
that's
up the wrong
official.
tree with that one. What about you, Tom? When you what appeals to you about a woman?
Well, intelligence, of course. This idea that men just, you know, as dumb as they like or whatever is obviously not true. But
No. I mean, you
someone you
never
can-
ever see all these rich men with sort of.
no, it's completely unheard of.
Very well. and finally, just to ask everybody, do we think that Nigel Farage is going into the jungle?
The Sun certainly seems to think
The
so.
Sun seems to think so. But I hope so, because he's the only one I've heard of.
Well, yes.
Absolutely.
Oh no, Jackie Dettori, supposedly.
Who's that?
There's Jockey, Frankie
Dettori.
Did I say Jackie Dettori?
Yeah, no, I've heard of Frankie Dettori.
But
I went
otherwise-
through that list and I thought, who
I don't
are
know.
these people?
I don't know any of them.
I'm also quite excited for it because, as we all know, one reality show can often lead to another one. So Strictly Come Dancing next.
Who knows?
That would be excellent.
We'll see you.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 10th of November. Today, the crows circle around Suella, but the Tory grassroots are sticking by her. Prime Minister facing pressure to sack his Home Secretary for going off script over protest politics. But could this actually boost Braverman? We're live in Westminster.
Suella Braverman's future is hanging in the balance, but given his precarious political position, can Rishi Sunak really afford to lose his Home Secretary?
And staying north of Hadrian's Wall, hundreds of Scottish water workers are apparently going to walk out this morning in what marks the first day of 3 months of disruption. GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has more.
Good morning. Yes, well, I'm in Glasgow where Scottish water workers embark on their first day of 4 consecutive days of strikes and the first week of 12 consecutive weeks. It's going to be a long, cold winter for many.
Now, should women be allowed to coach men's football? We're debating the issue with social media star Pearl Davis and football journalist Megan Garbett.
And of course, Alex has your weather.
There's some hefty showers around right now, but for many, much of today will be dry and bright. Join me later for all the details of today's and the weekend's weather.
And Paul's got your sport.
Liverpool score 2 but lose in Toulouse. It gets worse. And Brighton clean up at Ajax. You getting it?
Only
what
just,
do you think?
Paul.
Very
Only
good.
just.
Does it need some work? It's the best I've got for you.
Just a little bit. We'll see you later on. Morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Oh, what?
Graham says, did Anne just say British steel is Chinese owned? Yes. So going green means going to destroy our steel industry. This is all a Chinese game. What kind of idiots do we have in government?
Except we were talking to the mayor of Teesside, where they're having their steel industry sort of being boosted by having one of these arc things put in. And he says it helps to... It's going to help boost the industry. It may actually create more jobs in the long run. So do we need to take a longer view? Also, I talked to the head of UK Steel. How that relates to British Steel, I don't know. I have to do it. But anyway,
Is that a different company, UK Steel?
I don't know.
Oh, or
but anyway,
umbrella organisation?
I think it's Umbrella, because I talked to him on Tuesday afternoon, and he said the job losses, 2,000 or so, he said because this isn't going to happen for a couple of years, that would be lost through, natural wastage, people retiring and moving on and things like that, rather than anyone being fired, which obviously is a good thing.
OK, and we were talking about how to get decent sleep. What are your tricks? Andrew says, I always get a good night's sleep if I have my dogs, Gary and Barry, curled up with me.
Gary and Barry.
Having Gary and Barry with you?
Yeah, no, quite nice too. Let's talk about Suella Braverman, should we?
And how to police the protests tomorrow?
Has she spoken out of turn? Is she unhinged? Or is she saying... A lot of you getting in touch saying, well, she's saying what we think. The police aren't being even-handed and more needs to be done. Let's talk to Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, James Murray, who joins us now. A very good morning to you. Good to see you, as always. As an example, Stuart says this morning, well, look, with Suella Braverman, it's good to have someone telling the truth.
I think the problem is that Suella Braverman just feels out of control. She's using language which I don't think the Home Secretary should be using. I think it's inflaming community tensions. I think it's not helping the police to do their job in a sensitive situation. What she should be doing is supporting the police to go after those who perpetrate hate crime or extremism, whilst not using her language to ramp up community tensions. And frankly, I just think it shows that she's not the right person to be doing this job. And Rishi Sunak probably knows that. What it also shows is that he's a weak prime minister, because if he doesn't agree with what she's saying, he should sack her.
But, yes, you would argue that, wouldn't you? Because, he can't... He looks weak if he sacks her, and you might argue he looks weak if he doesn't. So what could he possibly do is right? Keir Starmer has said it's time for a change, but at the moment we need some sort of stability, particularly over the next 3 days, don't we?
Well, I think the Conservatives have shown they're completely incapable of providing either stability on the one hand, or the change that they concede the country needs. Remember, Rishi Sunak said at his conference, I think it was, that the country needs change. What we saw in the King's speech earlier this week is that the government are simply incapable of providing that change. So, frankly, Rishi Sunak is in a mess, because he can't bring himself to say that he agrees with what Suella Braverman said, but he also can't seem to bring himself to sack her. And frankly, the country needs stronger, stable leadership, and that's what we would offer going to the next general election.
But in terms of stability, you've got your own problems, haven't you? The Labour Party, whether parliamentary or wider spread, can't work out if it wants to call for a ceasefire in Israel and Gaza or not.
No, that's not true.
Of course it's true. Forgive me. Of course it's true. You've got councillors resigning across the country. You've got shadow ministers resigning over this issue. Of course it's a problem.
Look, there's no denying the fact that there are different opinions within the Labour Party about the approach to trying to end the suffering that we're seeing in Gaza and that follows the appalling terrorist attacks in Israel. Now, some people, as you said, are calling for a ceasefire, but Keir Starmer has set out very clearly what our position is, which is to call for humanitarian pauses, which we think are the most achievable way to alleviate some of the immediate suffering of Palestinians in Gaza. So we're calling for humanitarian pauses, for hostages to be released. And I think, there are different opinions across the Labour Party. Those opinions have been voiced, but Keir Starmer has listened to what people had to say and has set out our way forward.
And do you think that's right, that basically he has listened to what people have to say, he's asked for humanitarian pauses, which are now happening, but he's not saying anything stronger than that?
Well, what he's been saying for days and weeks now is that those humanitarian pauses need to happen urgently to make sure that aid can get in to help Palestinians who are suffering in Gaza. He's also been very clear we need to support Israel's right to defend itself, to rescue hostages, to make sure its people are safe. And I think through this, very difficult, desperate situation where we've seen, huge suffering of the Israelis who were attacked in the terrorist attacks, and now suffering of people in Gaza as a result of the humanitarian catastrophe there. What Keir Starmer is setting out is the way through that. He's showing leadership in saying what we need now is immediate humanitarian pauses, because that's the most achievable, the quickest way to get that aid in there to help Palestinians in Gaza.
What do you think should be happening with the pro-Palestinian rally this weekend? Do you think it should be allowed to go ahead? Do you think the police are being even-handed or a bit of a light touch with people who are perhaps chanting things which are anti-Semitic, which are even perhaps pro-Hamas? What would you like to see happen?
I think that any instances of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, hate crime, extremism need to be met with the full force of the law. But in terms of how the police protests, how they police the marches, and how they decide to act, is an operational decision for the police. Now, that operational independence is a very long-established principle in the UK. It's one that, frankly, Suella Braverman is riding roughshod over at the moment with her approach and her language. But I think that operational independence is a really crucial part of our system. And what I would say is this weekend we have a right to protest in this country. At the same time, the events this weekend, the armistice, the 2-minute silence, the Remembrance Sunday events are really important days in our national calendar. We need to make sure those events are protected and respected. I want the police to do whatever they need to do to make sure those events are protected. But in terms of the operational decisions, that is for them to take. And I think that's the right balance to have in this situation.
What's your gut feeling? I mean, do you fear that there may be violence tomorrow?
Well, look, I don't want there to be violence. I don't think politicians should do anything which in any way stirs up division or tensions. I think it's for the police to make their operational decision based on the evidence about what the best way is to police what's going to be happening in London over the weekend, to try and minimise the likelihood of any clashes. And frankly, I think it's for politicians to try and avoid stirring up any of the difficulties, avoid stirring up divisions, and try and bring communities together, and crucially to support the police in their operational decisions to try and get through this very sensitive situation.
Yeah, but doesn't she have a valid point? We've been talking to a former Met detective all morning who has said that there is a valid point in saying that some things which have been policed, like Just Stop Oil protests, for example, or Extinction Rebellion stuff, has been handled in a very different way to other things. That there is a sort of light touch to the way the police are responding to a lot of protests at the moment, and it is a sign of double standards.
Well, again, I don't think it's right for politicians to give a running commentary on police operational decisions. The politicians can set the framework through which the police operate, but ultimately the operational decisions is for the police to decide, and they will do that based on evidence and intelligence that they have at their disposal, and work out what the best way is to maintain the peace. And this weekend it's going to be a very sensitive situation because of the protests, and because we want to make sure that the Armistice Day 2-minute silence and the Remembrance Sunday events are fully protected. The objectives that we should support as politicians is to make sure that, for instance, Armistice Day, Remembrance Sunday events are fully protected. But in terms of how that's done, that's an operational decision for the police. And I think that's the right separation to have in our system.
You say to the marchers who are going to be marching tomorrow?
Sorry, could you say that again?
What would you say to the people who are going to march tomorrow, for whatever cause? What would you say to them now?
Well, it's not for me to address them directly. I think there is a right to protest, but also we need to make sure that the events over the Remembrance weekend are fully protected and respected. That's what I want to see happen. I will be in Greenford, in my local area, this Sunday, laying a wreath. I'll be at Ealing Town Hall for the 2-minute silence on Saturday. That is really important to me. It's really important to many of my constituents. And obviously there are events in central London, which I want to make sure are protected and respected. Now, alongside that, we have a very sensitive situation, a lot of community tension, right to protest. Let's let the police make those operational decisions about how to get through this sensitive weekend.
OK. James Murray, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Appreciate your time today. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. In fact, you look at the Mirror, which I think is a very good front page, actually.
It's interesting, the Mirror's front page, yes.
They're basically talking about the fact that it is Remembrance Sunday on Sunday, and it's Armistice Day tomorrow. And they do say there to the marchers, remember who won you these freedoms. And I think that's so important to remember.
Yeah, but it's how they put it in context. They say they fought and died for our freedom, freedom of speech and thought and protest. To Suella Braverman, how dare you try to take that away? To the marchers, remember who won you these freedoms. To Britain, we must all resist cynical efforts to whip up hatred. I mean, it's interesting that they take on all sides of that.
It's very even-handed, isn't it?
It is even-handed.
And the most important thing is, the cenotaph there and the poppies. No,
yeah.
Good front page.
Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to see what happens tomorrow. We're going to talk about British Steel now. And just before we get into the details of it, a lot of it is because British Steel is now, in effect, Chinese steel.
Yes.
Debbie in Stoke says, can't we let the Chinese shut it down and then our own government buy the steel factory and open it all up again? And I was going to say, well, no, surely not, Debbie in Stoke, because that would cost billions of pounds that we haven't got. Except I've just looked it up. The Jingye, which is a Chinese company, stepped in and bought it in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, during COVID, then?
No, just at the sort of start of COVID, for £24 million.
Gosh, that's not very much.
No. £24 million, which is peanuts. So, actually, Debbie in Stoke, you make a very good point.
It's an idea, so let it fail, buy it back cheap.
And then buy it back cheap.
And then throw money at it. And jobs.
Yeah, and jobs. And all this coming to light because it looks as though thousands of jobs could be lost at British Steel's Scunthorpe plant. So ministers are coming under pressure to try to protect employment and guarantee that steel can be made in the UK.
Yeah, no, as we've already pointed out, it's Chinese-owned at the moment, and the company has confirmed that they plan to replace the blast furnaces with 2 electric arc versions, which can run on zero-carbon electricity, but they don't make raw steel then.
No, it's all sort of recycling.
Yeah, it's different.
Which isn't a bad thing.
But it may not provide as many jobs. Anyway, they're still waiting for what they call appropriate support from the UK government. Our reporter, Anna Riley, explains.
British Steel has been the heartbeat of Scunthorpe for 160 years, creating employment for the local community. But times have changed. Now its blast furnaces are set to go electric to make steel production here greener by recycling scrap steel. And that could cost 2,000 people their jobs, as well as leaving the UK without the ability to produce its own virgin steel, with ministers pushing for reassurances if the government is to finance the scheme.
If we're going to give hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money to British Steel, we have to ensure that we protect steel jobs and that we retain a blast furnace steel-making capability in Scunthorpe. We can't do anything without steel as a nation. Nobody can.
If thousands of jobs are lost at the plant in Scunthorpe, this will have a huge knock-on effect to the local economy, which relies on trade from steel workers. Businesses like Beck Bakery, who sell the majority of food to staff from the plant.
Most of our trade is from the workers, either the British Steel or the contractors, that work on British Steel. I would say 90% of it is.
People here have faced years of uncertainty around the steelworks. They're used to cuts. But this feels different. The blast furnaces are the steelworks.
We make the best steel in the world. We always have them. Tyre cord, rail and everything. It's a steel industry. I don't know how you can go green with a steel industry.
Scunthorpe, it'll be like a museum. It'll be no good at all.
It's been British Steel and it's been here donkey's years, and we're down to the last one. We're down to the last steelworks here. And that'll be the end of it then.
It's inevitable. The steelworks has got to move forward and it's progress, and that unfortunately, sadly for jobs, that's what's happening.
British Steel, along with the council, have also announced plans for an advanced manufacturing park on part of the steelworks site, which could create thousands of green jobs, such as in hydrogen.
It seems a little bit callous to think that you'll try and redesign new jobs and all at the same time as other people are going to have to change theirs. But we've got to have a solid future for kids in this area to want to stay in this area. We want better paid jobs and high engineering jobs, that sort of stuff. And that's what we want for the future for local people.
British Steel's proposals will be reviewed by an external specialist on behalf of trade unions. If plans go ahead, the blast furnaces will remain operational until electric arc furnace installation from late 2025. Anna Riley, GB News, Scunthorpe.
Well, let's talk to the Conservative MP for Darlington, Peter Gibson, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning. I mean, although there's a slightly different story on Teesside, where they are getting electric arc furnaces, and that's being a boost for steel there. But I mean, what do we make of this move towards, a greener steel industry, but one which is going to cost jobs?
Well, there's a number of things to say to you, Stephen. Coming from Redcar as I do, and understanding the impact that the closure of the blast furnace at Redcar had on our local economy a number of years ago, I understand the deep concern in the community at Scunthorpe, and I pay tribute to my colleague Holly Mumby-Croft for the incredible work that she's done campaigning for her community. It's a bittersweet moment this week as we welcome the announcement of that electric arc furnace coming to Teesside, and the fact that we will see steel production reintroduced to our local economy, which is good for local jobs here on Teesside, good for our local supply chain.
Since we've been reporting on this since 6 o'clock this morning, a lot of our viewers have got in touch and said, why on earth is British Steel Chinese owned?
Well, if you look back at recent history, there's been a change of ownership of British Steel a number of times over the last couple of decades. The fact is that those jobs are British jobs. They're in Britain. They're producing goods and steel for our industries in our country. So whilst the company is owned by a Chinese company, they're still British jobs producing British steel.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was only, I mean, the figures online vary, but somewhere between 24 and 70 million the Chinese paid for it. Someone says, can't remember her name now, Debbie says, why can't we buy it back?
Well, the British government isn't in the habit of nationalising industries. It's a competitive marketplace out there. There are global supply chains at play. And it's just not something that I think is on the agenda. But I do support Holly in her campaign and push to make sure that there is support for British Steel in Scunthorpe. And I think as we explore...
Forgive me, Peter, but does that support mean trying to sort of re-employ people, or does it mean that she wants to scrap the arc furnaces and keep the blast furnaces?
I don't think it's an either or. I think that with the development of carbon capture and storage that we're seeing in the North Sea, that industry around the Humber and Teesside will be able to enjoy in the years ahead. Blast furnace production utilising the capture of the carbon that's released from the production of the raw steel is something that could really be explored and could be supported by the government, as they already are in the carbon capture and storage facility off Teesside.
Can you explain, I mean, how important is keeping that industry alive in that part of the UK?
Well, I think you need to look at the history and heritage of, the North East, both Humberside and Teesside, heavily industrialised parts of the past, which we have seen deindustrialised and transition our economies. We're seeing a very exciting time around Teesside at this particular point in time, with, as I say, the development of carbon capture and storage. Ben Houchin, our Tees Valley Mayor, has done an incredible job of repurposing the former steelworks site at Redcar, and we're seeing wind turbine technology and a whole host of new hydrogen-based industries developing in our area. So we're going through a transitional phase in that industrial process. And the heritage that we have from our steelmaking is really important as part of the local cycle. So the news that we've had this week in Teesside of an electric arc furnace coming to produce steel in our local economy is fantastic news.
As a Conservative, Peter, and seeing as we've got you on, what about Suella Braverman? And this ongoing row about the march this weekend, is she, as James Murray for the Labour Party saying, stirring up divisions, or, as Stuart's emailed in, says, just telling the truth?
Well, I think there's two things to say. First of all government ministers operate at pleasure of the Prime Minister, and as long as those ministers enjoy the confidence of the Prime Minister, they remain in post. And we understand from news reports that Number 10 has issued a statement saying that the Home Secretary has the Prime Minister's support. With respect to the weekend's events, I think it's incredibly important, and I think the majority of your viewers would agree, that Remembrance and Armistice are significant days in our national calendar, where we remember those people fought for our freedoms. And I think that those events should go off with dignity and respect, as they should, so that we can remember those people who served for us in the past.
And wouldn't the best way of ensuring that be to have banned these demonstrations days ago?
Well, the police have operational independence in respect of policing, and that is the case. And it's a matter for the police. They will have carried out their necessary risk assessments and assessments as to what should and shouldn't be banned. And we've heard from the police in respect of what they have said in respect of that. It's not for me to interfere in the police's operational matters.
Peter Gibson, good to see you. Very diplomatic, if I may say so. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right, should we have a look at some of the other news stories that are coming into the newsroom at the moment? And we'll start with Israel. They're going to begin daily 4-hour pauses in northern Gaza as heavy fighting rages on. But the UN says the amount of aid getting through is a mere fraction of what's needed to deal with what they call an intolerable situation.
Just 5 weeks left to save Scotland's hospitality industry. That's a warning being delivered to Holyrood from a trade body today, who says the sector's struggled to recover from high energy prices, lockdowns, pandemic-era restrictions, and everything else that's going on at the moment.
And the UK economy stagnated over the latest quarter, but did surpass the expectations of economists. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. Gross domestic product showed no growth in the 3 months from July to September, although there is apparently some optimism after a 0.2% increase was recorded for September.
I'm glad you got lumbered with that one. I always struggle with Office for National Statistics.
Very difficult to say.
Tell you what else I struggle with?
Pro-Palestinian protests.
Oh, that's
very
hard.
difficult to say.
President. Whenever we do American stuff, and it's all president. I struggle with president.
Oh.
So there you go.
You have to buy some new teeth.
Ah, could be it. Yes, I'm due a new pair to go with a new tube. But anyway,
Oh, yes. OK, no comment.
everything's fake. No, not really.
No.
Now, serious matters in Scotland for you this morning, because hundreds of workers at Scottish Water are walking out today. It's the beginning of 3 months of planned strike action following a pay and grading dispute.
Yeah, and this comes as it's revealed that the publicly owned company paid just 3 executives a near £3 million since 2021.
Ouch. Let's talk to our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, who joins us now. Morning to you, Tony. And clearly a lot of anger there behind you.
Yes, indeed. Certainly, as you so eloquently put out there, that this is quite a complicated issue with many facets. Indeed, the central issue here is that 89% of what unions are calling an emphatic mandate of the membership voted in favour of industrial action, and the result is, well, thousands of staff at Scottish Water across. Thousands of staff at Scottish Water across the whole of Scotland from Unite and Unison, and as you can see behind me, a good turnout from GMB as well, here to protest this pay dispute. Now, as you said, this is off the back of £3 million going to executives over the last few years, including over £1 million in bonuses. And this is the company that is publicly owned and has come under fire quite significantly in the last few months for the amount of sewage and issues that have going into the Scottish Water. After all, it would have been on their watch. Now, the Scottish Lib Dems have been perhaps most vocal about this, with Alex Cole-Hamilton saying that it's utterly shameful for the government-owned water company where executives pocket bumper bonuses while our rivers and coastlines are destroyed. And just to give you an idea, 50 of Scottish 89 bathing waters have now got unacceptable levels of toxic waste in them, and sewage. So it would appear that here today in Glasgow, the first of 4 consecutive days of strikes, and indeed on the first of 12 consecutive weeks of strikes across Scotland, that it's a cold morning, as you can no doubt see from the picture behind me, but spirits are high here, and it very much looks like that they are ready to bed in here for the long run. For people all around Scotland, any issues with drainage, with sewage, or indeed with water supply will have to wait until Tuesday as Scottish Water prepare to make amends to try and get some kind of deal over the line. They've got 12 weeks to do so. They've said that the 8% that they have offered staff is going to be sufficient, and that they are devastated with this action being taken. However, the unions say that, unfortunately, as a result of this new grading system that was proposed by Scottish Water, some of the lowest earners could lose up to £5,000 per year.
Tony, for now, thanks very much indeed.
It looks murky up there at the moment.
Murky and cold.
Yeah, very cold.
Anyway, let's see what the weather's going to be like right across the UK. Here's Alex.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a chilly one out there today. Most of us seeing some sunshine, but there are some heavy showers around, particularly right now across the south of England. Seen some downpours through the night and some very gusty winds in the southwest. They too are starting to ease. So many places turning dry and bright, just a sprinkling of showers over northern Scotland and through Northern Ireland. And later this afternoon, we may see some showers returning to North Wales and northwest England. Temperature-wise, a bit chilly first thing, pockets of frost across parts of Scotland, but temperatures by this afternoon, mostly single figures in the north, 11, maybe 12 across the south. Quite quickly this evening, temperatures will dip. We'll see more showers coming into Wales and western parts of England, and we'll keep them going through the night across northern Scotland. But for many, it'll be dry and clear. Could be some mist and fog. There'll certainly be a bit more frost around tomorrow morning, anywhere from the Midlands northwards in rural spots. And even further south, we could see a few pockets. Mist and fog could take a few hours to clear on Saturday, but it should clear. And most will have a fine day then with good spells of sunshine. Still a few showers across the far north of Scotland. One or two could just clip North Sea coast. It'll turn a bit hazy, the sunshine in the southwest later on, but for most it's dry and bright tomorrow. Good looking day. Again, 8 or 9 across the north, 11 or 12 further south. It will be a cold start to Sunday with frost and fog patches once more. Bye for now.
Now, this is interesting because it absolutely, I can't figure out why people get so upset about it. But the Lionesses manager has said that it's only a matter of time until the men's team gets a female manager. Would you welcome that idea? What's even wrong with the thought of that idea? I don't understand why people get so worked up about it. But they do, so we're going to be debating that in just a couple of minutes.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you.
every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Hi there, it's 8:35. Now, the manager of the Lionesses has come out and stirred things up a bit, frankly, because she said that it's only a matter of time before a female manager takes full-time charge of a men's team. What a shock.
Horror. We got a flavour for full-time female management in the men's game when Hannah Dingley took the reins at Forest Green in pre-season. But should it happen again?
Well, on one side of the debate, we've got football journalist Megan Garbett, who says the women's game has grown massively over the years, and the quality of the coaching has too.
Yes, but social media star and feminism critic Pearl Davies thinks female appointments are often more political than earned, and they both join us now. Good morning to you, Pearl. What's wrong with this?
Well, I would say the issue you have in women's sports is it becomes a political agenda rather than giving the best person that is there for the job. And that is my issue, is when it becomes, really, I don't even think it matters if it's man or woman. I think it is the most competent person for the job. Why do we keep going back to a female manager, a female manager? It should just be the best manager for the job.
But are you worried then that there would be token appointments? Somebody wanting to make a point would appoint a female manager when actually there may be a man around who would be better?
Yeah, my biggest issue is when it becomes a political agenda. I don't think as women we need special handouts or special treatment. I think the best person for the job should get the job.
OK, Megan, what's your take on this?
I totally agree with what Pearl's saying. It should go to whoever deserves the job, but I think the people that do make those appointments will look at it that way. I don't think anyone would appoint a female just for the sake of it. I mean, you look at what Emma Hayes has done at Chelsea Women. Obviously she's leaving at the end of the season, but there's no reason why she would not be able to take charge of the men's team high up in you know, in the English game or anywhere in the world, because frankly they get the same coaching, you know, they've had access to the same coaching badges, they've got the same skills, expertise, the same knowledge, so there shouldn't be a problem with it at all.
And yet people seem to be scandalised, don't they? I mean, what's wrong? Why are we even making an issue of it?
Well, I would say even when women are polled, they do not prefer female bosses. So I would say women in general struggle in positions of leadership. I don't think we're naturally good at it. I do think there are exceptions to the rule, as there are in anything, but I do see it being a political agenda where they do not put the best women or they do not put the best person in the position. They just put women in because they're women.
Why do you think, Pearl, that women are not natural leaders?
I just think there are things that women are naturally good at and men are naturally good at. Women just tend to be more agreeable, and the trait disagreeability tends to be better for, or men tend to be more that way, where women tend to be more agreeable.
You've forgotten Margaret Thatcher and Liz Truss and various other prime ministers we've
Well,
had.
if you want to look at women in positions of political power, they're actually more violent and more willing to wage war. So I actually think that women do struggle in positions of political power as well. For example, your shortest prime minister ever here was a woman.
Megan, what's your take on whether women can... Do women have the same ability to lead a team? And particularly, I guess, when you're talking about leading a team of sort of young and, I suppose, a little bit bolshy men on a football team?
I mean, look, we know football has been a male-dominated sport for so long, and that, you know, that should not be the case anymore. It should be equal. But yeah, obviously there's going to be different challenges when it comes to managing a men's team to a women's team. Yes, you're going to have the men want to make a name for themselves individually as well as a team. So you have got to manage those, those different attitudes in the team. But there isn't any reason that people like Serena Wiegman or Emma Hayes or other women managers, there's no reason they can't do that.
Well, I just think if women were so good at managing a team, they would be better at managing their league. I mean, women, by and large, women's leagues are not profitable. Women's leagues do not make money. So how are we going to say we are so great and amazing and awesome at managing a team when we can't even manage our own league? The majority of women's leagues really are subsidized by the men.
I think the WSL is creating so much revenue at the minute, and even women's football in America is, really equal to the men's game as well. I think
it's not equal at all.
It's making
if you look at profits, it's not even close. It's not equal.
But in terms of the people that are watching the game and, spending money on the game, it's making so much money to what it was, even 5 years ago. And I don't see that there's any issue.
If it's unprofitable, and that's again, which goes back to the problem, women's sports don't tend to make money. If they do tend to make money, it tends to be they're monetizing sexuality in some way. But really, by and large, women's sports do not make money. And I've really seen this become a political issue over the years where the women will cry and whine and bitch and moan about their pay. When really, by and large, women do not deserve more money because they do not make what the men make. And it becomes a political issue where we want more money for less work, and I can't stand it. I'm a female athlete. I've been in athletics for 16 years, and I'm really sick of it becoming a handout off. Who can get the most handouts? Really, I think if women want more money and they want to be in these positions, we wouldn't have to keep saying we need females in these positions. They would just be in those positions. We need competent people. There is a shortage of competent people in the world. If you are competent, you will get the role. And women want special handouts and treatments, and we're even doing a whole segment on female managers. What does that tell us? That we're not competent enough in general to get the roles.
I think obviously we know that the men's game in football and in other sports do produce more revenue, but that doesn't mean the women's game doesn't produce revenue. You just look at the WSL in England, and the men's grounds are being used to house the women's games now, and they're selling out those grounds. And that's just showing how far the game is coming. And I think, it is a matter of time before someone breaks that barrier and will manage a men's team high up.
By and large, women's sports operate at a loss. The WNBA operates at a loss. College athletics, women's college athletics, it's subsidized by male athletics. By and large, women's sports operates at a loss, just because maybe you could point to one small league somewhere or one league, which really, by and large, I don't know 5 female footballers. Most people couldn't list you 5 female footballers, and the only ones you can really list are the ones that have become political. They make it a political movement, and I think it ruins the sanctity of the sport because we're more worried about getting a female manager than we are in improving the game.
But Pearl, it isn't part of the issue here. You say the women can't manage it. It's not as profitable as it could be, and all the rest of it. But that's not down to the game. It's not down to the players or the managers. That's down to the public not supporting it in the same way, and that is something, certainly in the UK, that we are seeing start to change.
Yeah. The public doesn't support it because it's not as entertaining. I mean, do you, sir, can you list 10 female soccer players?
Well, no, but
no,
I couldn't.
Exactly.
No,
That's my point.
No, but
support us.
No, I couldn't.
Support us, please.
No, I couldn't.
That's my point. That's my point.
No.
Because it's not entertaining.
That's a mute.
Yes.
That's a mute point because I couldn't name 10 male players. So
yeah, and here's the thing. I don't even watch soccer, but really, by and large, I could tell you more male players than female players because the males are more entertaining. And my thing is, ladies, if you want people to watch, be more entertaining, and then you will get more viewers. Stop shaming the viewers. If a product is not selling, you don't go to the market and say, you bad customers, you're just not supporting my product. You improve the product. So I say improve the level of the game, be more entertaining, and then people will watch.
Okay,
and
Megan,
if you're not willing to do that, stop crying to me about it.
Megan, last word from you.
I mean, you obviously don't sort of pay attention to the WSL in England because that's got its own fan base in itself. And if I ask those people that invest their time in the women's game, if they can name 5 players, they can probably name 50 women's players in the game because they invest their time in it.
Let's go on the streets of England and tell them name 5 female soccer players and name 5 male soccer players.
Well, I tell you what, you've both been very entertaining just on this subject. So, but we've got to wind you up there. But thanks very, very much indeed.
Yeah.
What a lively debate.
Interesting one. Just a very brief word from Paul Kite.
Keep me out of this. I don't want anything to do with it, quite frankly. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, I agree with a lot of stuff that Megan says as well. It is a growing sport. Let's be honest here. Over the last 5 years, we've seen it grow and grow. It's not a competition between men's football and women's football. They can go hand in hand, they can go along together. That is growing. And as far as a manager's concerned, it's not like we're saying, let's get women players involved in men's football. It's a managerial job, and that is a different situation. It's about knowing the game, it's about understanding the game, and it's about management and working with players. And that doesn't matter, in my opinion, whether it's a man or a woman. It obviously makes a difference how players will react to that, but that's up to them. But when it comes to actually doing the job, I don't see it will make a difference at all.
OK, Coity, thank you very much indeed. Heck, that was
Let us know what you think.
Yeah, do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com. We've got headline makers heading our way in just a second.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Headline makers now joining us to go. What's wrong with that?
Oh, you sounded very, it was very sort of, that was a bit Joanna Lumley, I thought.
I take that as a compliment. Thank you awfully. Where was I? Sorry, we're doing headline makers now, yes. Editor of Spiked, Tom Slater is with us, and former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Welcome both.
Morning. Tom, no, sorry, you've just tickled.
You're in a very funny mood.
You've tickled my fancy, Ms. Diamond. Let's have a look at the COVID inquiry, Tom, should we? Where Priti Patel told us yesterday that before he was fined for breaking the COVID rules, Boris Johnson wanted bigger fines for everybody else.
Yes, so this is when they were kind of opening up slowly after the summer lockdowns, in which they were talking about how to manage the messaging, and Boris Johnson issued this note to his advisors saying that obviously he's behind the reopenings, but we need the overriding message, all caps, to be that there will be tougher enforcement and all caps bigger fines. And as you say, this was within weeks of him attending his own cabinet room birthday party, where he had a couple of cans of beer and a slice of cake.
Yes, but he was assaulted by a cake.
Yes, he was.
He was assaulted by a cake. He was ambushed by a cake. It was doing all kinds of terrible things to him. I think this is just a useful reminder of the fact that Boris Johnson, and I say this from someone who was very against lockdown, has kind of been written up as the one man of principle within government. He stood up to the modellers, he stood up to the advisors, and it's true that, you know, if maybe someone else were in power, we might have been in lockdown for a little bit longer. But at the same time, he was only really right sometimes because he just oscillated wildly between the two positions. That's something that's come out of the COVID inquiry. That's something that's come out of all the reporting and the documentaries and so on. It's not that he ever really had like a principled opposition to it. And when you're thinking about these fines in particular, Boris Johnson was fined, what, £100 for his particular indiscretions. There were students who were given £10,000 fines for organising house parties. That's a life-ruining amount of money for someone at that particular age, particularly if they don't come from money. So that's one thing that I think I wish had come out of the whole Partygate scandal, if nothing else, would be that all of those people who've been issued, particularly those kind of exorbitant fines, would just had the slate wiped clean.
Yeah.
The fact that didn't happen, I think, is a big problem.
It does need to be, doesn't it?
I think so.
But I think what's so interesting about the whole COVID thing is that some people say that Nadine Dorris's book about Boris and the plot to get rid of him is the beginning of the move to get Boris back, is that he's going to wait and he's going to... And I think that when his pals say that he doesn't have the right skill set to deal with this crisis, that you do feel that Boris probably was one of our worst prime ministers ever, and we really don't want him back.
There are a lot of people who do, though, aren't there? There are a lot of people who do.
Oh, yeah. No, so I was talking to somebody who said that Boris has moved into the Cotswolds and he goes to his local pub and it is absolutely divided in half between people who think he's completely wonderful and people who think he's completely wrecked the country.
Everything these days is Marmite.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Everything's black and white. There's no shades of grey anymore. And I think I find a bit depressing.
At least where Boris is concerned, I think one thing that, whilst people on the other side of the Brexit argument won't necessarily like him for. The one intuition he had was that Brexit is important and it had to get over the line, otherwise we would have serious consequences for people's faith in democracy and so on. That is one thing he genuinely called right, in my opinion, and I think that's something that, even though I've never voted for him, I've never been a supporter of his, I think we'll look on more favourably.
You just said that some of the inquiry is showing that Boris Johnson vacillated or oscillated, didn't you? But how could anyone not oscillate when we were dealing with a crisis that was unprecedented? Is it that inhuman to think, you know, that any one of us, given that sort of job, would probably oscillate?
Now, I think oscillating at the beginning was fine when we really didn't know. But actually, this memo that Tom's talking about was quite late on. It was after the first lockdown. I think that first lockdown, I think anybody should be able to hold up their hands and go, I just didn't get it. I didn't. I mean, there was this whole view was that the Italians were sort of wimpish and it would never come to Britain because we're so strong. There was people who wanted lockdown immediately. There were people who didn't. There was a complete mess around the schools. All of that, I think the first lockdown really is excusable. There's some things in it that aren't. I think taking old people with COVID and putting them into care homes was inexcusable, but I think you're right. But if you look, the problem is that it never got any better, and the oscillation was what everybody says about, and certainly Anthony Seldon in his biography of Boris says, is he's somebody who goes with what was the last person who said it.
Yeah. OK. Look, we've got to leave it there. I hate to say it. Tom, Scarlett, thank you very much indeed. Short but sweet this morning.
We're not going to do the sewage in the Thames.
No, sewage in the Thames another day.
Yeah.
That's not a breakfast topic.
No, it's not. Let's have a look at the weather for you.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bit of a chilly one out there today. Most of us seeing some sunshine, but there are some heavy showers around, particularly right now across the south of England. Seeing some downpours through the night and some very gusty winds in the southwest. They too are starting to ease. So many places turning dry and bright, just a sprinkling of showers over northern Scotland and through Northern Ireland. And later this afternoon, we may see some showers returning to North Wales and northwest England. Temperature-wise, a bit chilly first thing, pockets of frost across parts of Scotland, but temperatures by this afternoon, mostly single figures in the north, 11, maybe 12 across the south. Quite quickly this evening, temperatures will dip. We'll see more showers coming into Wales and western parts of England, and we'll keep them going through the night across northern Scotland. But for many, it'll be dry and clear. Could be some mist and fog. There'll certainly be a bit more frost around tomorrow morning, anywhere from the Midlands northwards in rural spots. And even further south, we could see a few pockets. Mist and fog could take a few hours to clear on Saturday, but it should clear. And most will have a fine day then with good spells of sunshine. Still a few showers across the far north of Scotland. One or two could just clip North Sea coast. It'll turn a bit hazy, the sunshine in the southwest later on, but for most it's dry and bright tomorrow. Good looking day. Again, 8 or 9 across the north, 11 or 12 further south. It will be a cold start to Sunday with frost and fog patches once more. Bye for now.
Now, how do veterans mark Remembrance Weekend?
By having a joke.
Having a joke and a laugh. You can sort of understand why we're going to be meeting 2 veteran stand-up comedians in just a few minutes.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock. It's Friday, the 10th of November, and these are the stories we've been covering on breakfast this morning.
Well, the crows have been circling around Suella, but the Tory grassroots are sticking by her. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, faces pressure to sack his Home Secretary for going off script over protest politics. But could this actually boost brand Braverman? We'll be live in Westminster for you.
Well, British Steel, well, it's Chinese-owned these days, but thousands of jobs are under threat from plans to make British Steel's Scunthorpe plant go green. So we've been asking, what does it mean for regional employment and for our very own Great British Steel?
And it's all coming out now as the COVID inquiry continues to reveal the omnishambles that went on in Whitehall. New WhatsApp messages show that Matt Hancock was really worried that checks on jabs were inadequate a month after the rollout began.
Plus, a judge is expected to give their decision on whether Prince Harry and others' privacy case against the publisher of the Daily Mail will go any further. We'll get the details from our royal reporter, Cameron Walker.
Yeah, join me shortly to find out why Prince Harry's case against the publisher of the Mail could be about to take a dramatic turn, so don't go anywhere.
And just a few minutes ago, we debated if women should be allowed to coach men's football or manage a man's team. You can watch the full debate on our website, by the way, gbnews.com.
Also coming up for you in the next 30 minutes, Alex will have your weather forecast.
There's some hefty showers around right now, but for many, much of today will be dry and bright. Join me later for all the details of today's and the weekend's weather.
Good morning to you. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Women in men's football has got you going a little bit?
Oh, my goodness. John says, I could name more female footballers than I could male footballers. The women's game is much more entertaining.
Yeah, Mark in Leicester says, to be fair, I think women managing the men's teams would be a good idea, But then he goes on to say, you sort of ruin your argument a little bit, Mark, by saying some of the men's players are big girls. but the problem with that is it makes... It's using girls as a derogatory term.
Yes, please, let's give that up. Michael says, when women start playing in the Premiership or even the lower leagues, then it's time to have a female manager.
Mel in Sunderland, hi Mel, will be very happy for the current manager of the Women's England team to come to Sunderland, work for a few months with Tony Mowbray to get to know the club and team and then take over.
And we've been talking about British Steel, which, as you pointed out, is actually Chinese-owned in this country.
Yes.
And Ray says, I worked in the steelworks on Teesside from leaving school until closure in 2015. Steelworks here haven't been UK-owned since approximately 1999. Do you have any idea how much it costs to import iron ore, coal and other additives to make iron and transform them into steel? Electric arc is the way forward.
Because that's all down to recycling.
And I suppose recycling is a good thing.
Well, you can recycle metal forever.
But maybe not to the same standard as raw steel, I don't know.
It might be a different grade, I don't know. But certainly you wouldn't have to bring the iron ore in and you wouldn't have to bring the coal in.
Well, it's good to hear from somebody who's actually been there and done it.
Knows the business.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's can we develop the electric arc technology and what we're doing with recycling steel in the UK to make it a bigger and more profitable business? Possibly.
And it really matters. It really matters to the communities where that steelworks have always been. Anyway, on to our top story this morning. The Home Secretary's future, well, they say it's hanging in the balance.
Yes, now you may remember that writing in the Times yesterday, Suella Braverman not only accused the police of giving pro-Palestinian demonstrators special treatment, she apparently did so without the approval of Number 10.
And for the Home Secretary to do that is astonishing. But Rishi Sunak, though, says he has every confidence in her. That's often not a good sign, actually. But calls for her to be sacked have not gone away, because here is Sir Keir Starmer.
He must know that this isn't the way in which a Home Secretary should behave. He must know in himself that the role of responsible government is to reduce tension and to support the police in difficult decisions that they have to make. He's got a Home Secretary who's out of control, and he is too weak to do anything about it. That's the worst of all combinations, and that's why across the country, repeatedly people are coming up to me and saying, we just need change now. We've just had enough of this.
Well,
see, and that's where Sir Keir Starmer's got a point.
Well, we need change.
No, not necessarily, but that the Prime Minister is too... If the Prime Minister doesn't like what Suella Braverman has done or said, he cannot do anything about it because he can't afford to lose her. So he is, in that sense, too weak to do anything about it. And that's not a party political issue. That's just that's the reality of the situation.
He may not wholly disagree with what she said.
No, well, he might not.
We don't know.
He might
not. I mean, we're told that Number 10 wanted to make a few changes and that some changes were made, but not all.
Not all. And the problem is, of course, Number 10 have come out and said, well, the Prime Minister has full confidence in his Home Secretary, but as we know historically, that often means the opposite, so you can't actually read anything into that.
Not at the moment. Let's remind ourselves, though, of Suella Braverman's recent remarks, the remarks that have led some Conservative MPs to say she's actually unhinged.
Which is very strong language in and of itself. She's been criticised for using phrases like an invasion or hurricane of migrants coming to the UK.
And a week ago, another intervention, the pro-Palestinian demonstrations she called hate marches.
Yeah, and now in her article she used the force of applying, accused the police force of applying a double standard to the way it handles protests.
And then she claimed aggressive right-wing protesters were rightly met with a stern response, whilst pro-Palestinian mobs were largely ignored.
You see, it's things like mobs. Now, look, there are people there saying things which they shouldn't be saying and which are problematic and anti-Semitic and all the rest of it. But there are also a lot of people going down there who are just protesting.
Yeah, and to call them hate marchers is strong.
It is strong, because it might apply to some of the people there, but it certainly doesn't apply to all. And this is the problem when you use these very broad brushstrokes. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley, who's in our Westminster studio for us this morning. Is this going to prove to be a huge problem for the Prime Minister, or can he ride this out?
Well, it really feels today as though Rishi Sunak is stuck between a rock and a hard place. He can't really afford to lose his Home Secretary the day before these marches take place, the day before Armistice weekend, and the week before that Rwanda legislation, which the Home Secretary has been championing, gets to the Supreme Court. But he's got MPs breathing down his neck on both sides. Moderates in the party, those on the left of the party, if you like, say that Suella Braverman is dangerous and unhinged. They're briefing the newspapers, they're briefing broadcasters, they're talking to people like me and saying she has to go urgently. But then Suella Braverman has her allies within the party. There are about 30 or 40 MPs who are standing very staunchly beside her and would kick up a huge fuss if she got sacked. So the Prime Minister has to weigh up how much the opinions of those different groups of MPs matter to him, and of course what the country thinks. There are those who believe that Suella Braverman is just saying what the rest of the country is thinking. If he sacks her now, there are definitely risks involved. What will happen over this weekend? A brand new Home Secretary in charge of the Met Police in a weekend set to be filled with tension. But if he doesn't sack her now, it looks as though he's weak. He's been undermined and he isn't doing anything about it. So it's going to be an interesting day as we watch and wait for what Rishi Sunak's going to do.
And he, meanwhile, will be waiting and watching to see what happens tomorrow. I mean, if, God forbid, there is any violence tomorrow, he could very easily blame her and sack her then.
He could blame her and sack her then, but if he chooses to do that, there would be those that said, well, why didn't you sack her before the weekend? If this was going to happen, if this was in the wings, then you should have got rid of her immediately. So there's no clear answer for Rishi Sunak. Whatever he does, he's going to get a lot of criticism from all sides.
Yeah. Really can't win on this one. OK, Olivia, thanks very much indeed. And let's have a look at a couple of stories developing throughout the day here on GB News.
Well, a judge is expected to give a decision on whether Prince Harry and others' privacy cases against the Daily Mail will go any further. Preliminary High Court hearings took place over 4 days in March, if you remember, to consider legal arguments.
Also, 2 women set to appear in court over paragliders displayed at a pro-Palestinian march. First of all, let's head to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Hi, Cameron.
Hi, Stephen. Yes, the accusations against the publisher of the Mail and Mail on Sunday from Prince Harry and those 6 other high-profile figures include unlawful information gathering, such as using private investigators to place listening devices inside cars, so-called blagging for private records, and recording private telephone conversations. Now, Associated Newspapers Limited firmly denies all the allegations, and in March asked the judge to rule in their favour without a trial, saying that the challenges have been brought far too late. Well, lawyers for Prince Harry and the other high-profile figures, which includes Elton John, say they were thrown off the scent and they were not aware they were being targeted until more recently because they believed the categorical denials from Associated Newspapers. Well, Mr. Justice Nickland's decision is expected in less than an hour's time at 10 o'clock this morning. But a bit of context here, this is one of 6 civil cases Prince Harry is currently dragging through the courts here in the United Kingdom, and it shows that him stepping back as a working member of the royal family has given him the freedom to get away from the royal family's motto of never complain, never explain.
Cameron, thank you.
And now let's move on to our GB News national reporter, Theo Huchikomba. Morning, Theo. Sorry, can you tell us about the court case that's happening where you are, about these 2 women who wore those pictures on their backs of their coats?
Yes, well, a very good morning to you. As you've mentioned, 2 women will be appearing here at Westminster Magistrates Courts this morning, just after 10 a.m. They have been charged under the Terrorism Act in connection to displaying images of paragliders at a pro-Palestine march last month. And they are Heba Al-Hayay and Pauline Ankunda. And we've also heard from the CPS who say, following a review of evidence provided by the Metropolitan Police, we have authorised charges against the 2 women who took part in a demonstration in central London last month. So, as I say, they'll be appearing here in about an hour or so. They have been on bail until today, and we'll be hearing what's going to be happening as the proceedings take place just after 10 o'clock this morning.
OK, Theo, thanks very much indeed. So that's 2 court cases that are happening in the next morning, I think, throughout the morning.
So we'll keep an eye on that for you. Well, we won't, because we'll be off air, but Tom Harwood will, because he's on air at 9:30 this morning. Morning, Tom.
Good morning. It's going to be a very busy day. Of course, a lot of focus on the Home Secretary, but something slightly interesting is going on, of course. We know that the UK has our Rwanda court hearing concluding on Wednesday. But what some people might not have noticed is that other countries are looking at this very, very carefully. I'm going to be talking to a man from Germany who is behind the drive to get the German government to adopt the same policy of offshore processing for migration. That's something that Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, has been saying that the German government is now looking at. So it's not just the UK, it's also Denmark and Germany, perhaps many, many European countries.
And even Austria
are going to be following this policy precisely. So that's going to be a really fascinating conversation I'll be having at 11 o'clock. But also, of course, we've heard from the Defence Secretary in the last 24 hours saying that poppy sellers must feel safe to be able to sell their poppies. Lots of poppy sellers feeling intimidated right up and down the country. We'll be asking what people's thoughts are on that and exploring that issue in more depth too.
Lovely stuff, Tom. Thanks very much indeed.
And coming up, we've got 2 very special guests. They are stand-up veterans, and they have a joke or 2 in store for you. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
9:17, time to give you a bit of a smile this morning.
Yeah, we've got a laugh going on, which is good.
Yeah.
Especially considering the news is pretty dismal at the moment.
Isn't it
and
just?
quite sombre when you think of it, because tomorrow's Armistice Day, a day of remembrance, of course, for our fallen heroes. That's always the way we put it. But what many forget is that it's just as important, if not more, that we actually remember those who survived, living veterans.
Yeah, because it's what they've been through and how they cope. We're joined in the studio by two Afghanistan veterans, Jeff Reed and Dean Halliwell, who are members of the Veteran Stand-Up Comedy Show.
And Jeff has a little something to say, I think.
Hello, CNN! Obviously, I realise we're not on CNN, I'm on GB News, but I've told all my friends back home I'm on a world tour and I'm in America. So can we do that again and just do it with attitude? Hello, CNN!
Hey!
Thank you. I've got a friend of mine called Minnie. She's about 5'4" tall. She wears dark glasses because she's visually impaired and she walks with a Zimmer frame. I bumped into her the other day at the cash machine and she said to me, Jeff, would you mind checking my balance? And I said, yes, of course I can. And I pushed her over. My name's Jeffrey Reed, thank you, and good morning.
Oh, great stuff.
Oh, dear, Jeff, we're going to wheel you over here as we talk to Dean Halliwell, who's here in the studio. Look, it's a bit odd for people who aren't connected to the armed forces to think that part of what you do, especially around sort of this Remembrance Day, is you have a good laugh about things.
Well, I think, you know, especially in the military, we kind of have that gallows humour anyway. We have a very dark sense of humour anyway, and it's either that laugh or cry. But I think when you come back even more so and you start having more downtime and more time to think to yourself, and maybe you aren't spending as much time with, you know, the other guys that you spent in service with, it's a lot harder to find the humour in the things that you're doing. So, you know, I think courses like what myself and Jeff have just done.
Oh, you've done a course in this, have you?
Yeah. So we
How do they teach you to do stand-up?
Well, the first part of it was kind of improvisation, so that kind of helped us let go of all those inhibitions and kind of just go with whatever comes to mind at first. So, you know, some of the stuff might be a load of nonsense and rubbish.
I thought you were going to say rude.
No. Well, yeah, that too as well. I think that for military people, that's probably the first part where we go to the first time, yeah. But, you know, and sometimes it can be really good, some of the material that comes out, and then sometimes it can be absolute nonsense, you know. But that improvisation that we start really helps you, you know, drop those barriers that we all put up, which then helps you to kind of start writing your stand-up comedy next, which is the next part that we ended up doing. And we ended up doing our very first stand-up gig at the Backyard Comedy Club over in East London. So, you know, you had...
Well, I bet that was a tough crowd, wasn't it?
Well, I think it weren't too bad because it was half of our guests and half of the people on the course there. But I think, you know, overall, we've had a cracking night there. And then some of the lads have gone on to do... continue doing stand-up. One of our mates, Fred Bell, who's on the course, I think he's on his 27th gig or something now.
So
he's smashing it out, yeah.
What's it like for you, Jeff, in the idea that you can sort of laugh in the face of tragedy and pain and all that sort of thing?
I think the head knowledge that I've taken away from it is the two guys who initiated the course, Neil Davis and Sean Johnson, they'd done the course previously, and what they found is when you're doing improvisation, you're sparring off the person opposite you, as you know, so somebody throws a line, and if you can clear your headspace so you have nothing in there, and then you can deliver your line, that's the way improv works at its best. And what they found was that if you are a PTSD sufferer and you're triggered by a smell, or a sound. It might be firework. It might be a
balloon popping would do it.
Popping would do it. If you can use that technique, what we've learned in improvisation, to clear your mind, then you can push through that and you can carry on and have a normal day.
Do they teach you how to take a heckle? I mean, do people heckle you, or are they generally kind?
Yeah, I think...
Who would heckle him?
yeah. Well, I'm seen as the angry northerner that puts the world to rights, which is probably more so evening TV, let's say, rather than morning TV.
I understand.
Well, that could be anyone from Workington.
It could be, yeah, exactly, that's it. So.
I banged on Dean's door this morning and he wasn't ready, and if you want to see an angry northerner, there's an...
Yeah, I can sympathise with that. Look, in terms of... I'll tell you what's interesting, because you raised, these coping mechanisms for PTSD and all the rest of it. We focus on those who have lost their lives, and it's important that we do so around remembrance, but it is about those people who have come back and left with, even if it's only a small trauma, it's still something that affects them for the rest of their days.
We live in a veterans community. There's supposed to be 200 of us, but our trustees have kicked 100 out, which is a story for another day.
Yeah, different story, yeah.
But if you come back late at night, sometimes you hear people crying literally out in the night. And it's really, 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 really...
harrowing.
Really harrowing. And that's what people don't understand, because when you put these people away and you forget about them, they're still having their lives to live.
Yeah.
They've seen something or experienced something that you can't just magic it away. You carry that.
So are you guys going to be doing something tomorrow? I mean...
Probably, I'm going down on Sunday to do remembrance myself. Tomorrow I'm doing something else, unfortunately. But I know some of the guys from the comedy club are going to be doing stuff on Saturday, aren't they?
Some of the guys, we're not doing anything collectively on this occasion. We're looking for gigs if anybody's...
I'm sure they will.
Absolutely.
Or if you'd like to give our course some money.
Yeah. Can I ask, what do you make of all this hoo-ha over the march tomorrow? The pro-Palestinian march and all the rest of it. Do you think... Because there's some veterans quoted in the papers, I mean, actually sort of World War II veterans saying, well, we fought for people to be able to have freedom. But where do you sit on that? Do you have a view, or do you just not think about it?
I agree entirely. People do have a right to march, but there's also that's got to be a line in the sand. And if you're making remarks that are hatred-led, then the answer's got to be no, because you're inciting violence. So we've seen violence, abject violence, and we don't want to see that in the streets of London.
No.
So for me personally, I can only speak for me. I think people should be allowed to march, but march under respectful, because...
Yeah, peaceful protest, isn't it? You know, I think violent... It kind of contradicts what the point of what they're doing's for, isn't it? You know, obviously they're talking about Palestine and obviously...
and peace, really.
Yeah, and peace and, you know, the people stopping doing what they're doing. Yet they're leading a march on a day that's meant to be remembering the people that give up their lives for us to live peacefully. You know, so it's all very contradictory, isn't it? So, you know, I mean, it's fair. If they want to march, but again, do it peacefully.
Do it in the right way.
And be respectful, you know, that's the main thing at the end of the day, is being respectful of what that day is meant to hundreds of thousands of people around the country, well, and the world as well.
Well, yeah, and it's not just those people who've actually been and fought, is it? It's also the families who've lost and all that sort of thing as well, isn't it?
But this is actually a brilliant way to end the programme today, because we're hearing it from you, and it's important that you guys are saying that.
Yeah,
very much
absolutely.
So, because we all hope and pray that actually it will be peaceful tomorrow.
Jeff Reed, Dean Helliwell, good to see you both this morning. Lovely to have a fellow Cumbrian on the show. It's always good.
Speak to one.
It's always good. You can't beat that accent, I tell you.
I'm from the Midland down, just so I don't...
Oh, there you go. You see. We're all tied in together. We'll see you tomorrow.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to